Did you know that you could be proud of the music you're making 90 days from now, even if you've never made music before? All it takes is a commitment to 5 minutes a day. Yep, just 5 minutes, and you'll embark on a transformative journey into music production and self-discovery. Can you spare that? I'm Bill Gates, and I've spent 20 years distilling my experiences with Grammy-winning artists, making tracks played over 65 million times into something epic for you, The Producer's Path. This isn't just a course, it's a gateway to mastering music production without needing expensive gear or prior experience. You don't need to be born rich, you don't need to be born gifted. All you need is a commitment to spending 5 minutes a day on music. The Producer's Path is a proven system that has supported top artists throughout the industry. And now it's your turn to access these secrets and forge your own unique sound. As you journey through the 12 levels of the Producer's Path, each step designed to build your skills and confidence, you'll not only learn music production, but also discover how to express your individual style, breaking the rules like a true artist. Join our vibrant Producer Dojo community, get feedback on your tracks, and maybe even feature on a Dojo mixtape. With no subscriptions and free updates for life, your path to music mastery is evergreen, and you can come back again and again and again, getting more out of it each time. So what's it going to be? Continue as is, or spend the next 90 days at the dojo transforming into the music producer you've always wanted to be? Listen to what your fellow dojo members have achieved with the Producer's Path. Their success stories could be yours.
I started from zero.
Dude, the way you laid it out,
Here's what you do first.
It's amazing.
The habit tracking changed my whole mindset.
honestly,
Huge breakthrough.
Huge difference.
comprehensive.
Game changers.
It gives me goosebumps.
Just blows my mind.
That's when I was like, okay, I can make music.
I'm actually doing some art.
Making music felt more real at that point.
To understand, hey, motherfucker, I'm doing this shit right.
I can show my children's children who I was.
Other people have been saying it sounds good.
Everybody's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting.
Never found the answer until I went to the Producer's Path.
Heck yeah, what is up out there in YouTube land? It is I, Bill Gates. I'm back here, but I'm not alone today. You can't see them yet, but there are 4 very fine music producers who are embarking on the Producer's Path or have been walking the Producer's Path for a while. And they're here today for the other 90% of music making, which is artistic development, figuring out what you want to say, how you're going to say it, what you're about, finding your voice and making it heard. You know, there's a lot more than just what all the parameters do. You know, there's knowing about music, and then there's being music. And that is what we're focusing on today. This is an artist development session, and I'm going to cut over now to the Zoom chat we've got going on, and we are going to go left to right through our wonderful dojo member guests, and we're going to talk about all the things that make their art, and make them love it, and why you should love it too. All right, lots of love. Let's go. Okay, what's up? Welcome, guys. How you doing?
Hey,
How you doing? So, well,
Oh, yeah, word up. So we got Scott Seldom, Jason Scatteregia or Scatteregia? How do you say it?
You got it.
Okay, awesome. We got Nicholas and we got Mark. And today is an artistic development session. It's a very small group. There's only 4 people, but that's all the better for focus. And I know you're not the one, if you're out in YouTube land watching this, you're not the one in the hot seat today, but humans are more alike than they are different. And it's very easy to feel alone with your problems when you're making music, because especially when you're doing it on a computer, a lot of that happens by yourself. Let's be real, at any level, you're often, you could be like the top producer in the world, and a huge portion of your day is still you by yourself at a computer, clicking a mouse and making decisions. So it can feel lonely, but you're not alone. You're with your comrades here at Producer Dojo. We're going to do our best to make sure to get you out on the right path. So pay attention out there in internet land, because I'm sure you'll share at least one conundrum with one of our guests here today. So I'm going to go from left to right on my Zoom screen, and on the top left of my Zoom screen is Scott Seldom. So I would like to please ask you to unmute and come introduce yourself so that everyone can get to know you.
Hey, I'm go by Scott online usually. I'm just joined the Producer's Path. Looking forward to get delving into it this summer. I've pretty new to production. I fiddle around with other musical instruments and that, but I haven't put it all together. I originally got into DAWs to do some looping and accompaniment to just for practicing or whatever. And I fell into the Ableton rabbit hole and spent a lot of time just playing with subtracted synths and stuff, and kind of got the bug. So I'm looking to see how I can put it all together, finish some tracks.
All right, very cool, very cool. So when it comes to music making, technical skill tends to be what is focused on when you are, reading about music making, because most of those music magazines are blogs or other, places that get paid to publish about music. A lot of the time they're funded by advertising from software companies or gear companies or what have you. And so they tend to focus on the technical side of music making. But if you think carefully through the music that has affected you powerfully over the years, and a lot of the music that may have inspired you to become a musician, much of that music, especially if it was made more than 5 years ago, was made on a computer that is, way worse than yours. And if it was made more than 10 years ago, it's made on a computer that's worse than your phone. And the technical stuff, it's like really secondary to like what it is that you're saying, what kind of emotions you're exploring, and really what kind of a place you're creating for people, right? And like music, I think when you really understand like music, what music's function is, its function is in many ways like, emotional architecture. It like creates a space within which this communication can happen. And that communication could be any number of things, but it's basically like it's creating a space. There's walls that define what's inside that space and what's outside that space. And there's a wordless communication through vibe and through style. That is really, when you're listening as a fan, a lot of the time that is more what you're connecting with. And you're seeing this space, you're seeing its boundaries, you're seeing its definitions, and then you're like, hey, this music is the stage, and now I'm the main character. And you can step in and populate that space and feel those things and live vicariously this emotional life of the person who's making the music. So while the technical side is important, and there are certain things that if they're technical things that if they're done badly enough, you're pretty much disqualified. But once you are elevated past the level of like just self-disqualification bad at music, what's really important is what your style is, what emotions you're exploring, and what you're saying about either yourself or some kind of an artificial character that is created as like an avatar or a persona, which may reveal a deeper level of self while it like hides the kind of superficial day-to-day level of self. So just, without falling down the trap of authenticity, because authenticity is normally what people's response is when I'm like, what is this space? What are you expressing? Authenticity is kind of like, it's like, it doesn't really mean anything in practical terms, except I want to make this as hard for myself as possible. That's like operationally what striving for authenticity usually, functions as. So without relying on like authentic self-expression, my music is about authentic self-expression, right? Please be a little bit more specific about that and tell us like about what it is that you want to say with your music, what kind of a space you want to create, what types of characters you're likely to find there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you hit right at it, right? Like a lot of what I was looking for when I was turned on to the ill methodology that you'd done a while back, and looking forward to in this is a lot. I mean, I don't know if I would use the word authenticity, but I feel like a lot of people who kind of want to create, they feel like they have something they want to say or something they want to add to the conversation. And that's a lot of why I kind of jumped into this to try to see, because right now I'm not really sure what that'll look like. I think my interests are pretty varied, and actually a lot of it is not in the electronic realm, I guess, but I feel like there's a lot to be said kind of in between those worlds, and a lot of what I'm into is stuff made in garages or on crappy tapes. So
okay, that's a great start. So yeah, because I mean, when you're defining like a musical space, at least as regards style, usually that comes in the form of like aesthetic, a medium, to an extent technique. For example, like Steve Reich's famous phasing technique like defines his music to a great degree, and that is a technical thing, kind of like it's a compositional technique. It's not so much like a plugin or whatever, but usually a combination of these styles of things. And if you kind of like, once you have one of those things, if you kind of keep pulling at that thread, usually the answers that you need to populate the rest will appear by you pulling at that thread. So you like DIY aesthetics, and you like grit, and like lo-fi sorts of things. What is it about that speaks to you?
I think perfection a lot of the time just, I don't know, this is just boring, right? I mean, I think that it's not so much a conversation at that point. If everything is absolutely on a grid, or if everything is absolutely made flawless, I don't know if that makes much for conversation, or I mean, ultimately music is something we would communicate with, right? So I mean, I guess that's why I gravitate towards that stuff. I mean, who the hell knows where it comes from, right? Like we all grow up listening to what we listen to. My parents are hippies. Who the hell knows? But a lot of what I gravitate towards when I'm a fan or when I'm listening to music is stuff that either pulls you like really introspectively. It's not so much like say dance music or party music or whatever. It's more stuff you lean into and when you're really feeling some feels or whatever, and also if you're pissed off, I mean, who doesn't love a little punk when they're pissed?
Okay, cool. Well, this is we're definitely getting somewhere. Are you familiar with wabi sabi, the aesthetic of wabi sabi?
I am not.
Okay,
is that the broken pot deal with the?
Yeah. Kintsugi, where you fill the cracks in broken pots with gold, is kind of like the classic example of that aesthetic. But basically, there's like three core principles to the wabi-sabi aesthetic of imperfection. There's imperfection, right?
Yeah.
Impermanence and incompleteness. And in the Buddhist roots of the aesthetic philosophy of wabi-sabi, those three things are the marks of the real, right? The real world, all because I mean, you only get like real true perfection with like the concept of triangularity, for example. Every real triangle is a little bit wonky in some way, you know, unless it's like abstract, right? So the aesthetic of Wabi Sabi, right, which is an aesthetic of kind of things that are a bit wonky and DIY, where they, you know, when things show their age, you know, that's something that is an aesthetic value, you know, like, for example, the wear on a favorite pair of shoes, you know, when you can see that this person loves that pair of shoes so much that they've worn them past the time when you really should, you know. And if you have like a bunch of nice shoes on your shelf, and then there's one pair of really beat up shoes, and the wear on those shoes shows that they are the favorite, right? A photo of that would be an example of like a Wabi Sabi sort of a thing, right? So you know, it's in choosing to prioritize the aesthetic of the real, you're basically choosing to say like yes to this world in its flaws and its wonkiness and what have you. You're choosing to say and there's something that is affirming about your experience as someone who takes in this aesthetic, in that clear valuation of the real and the flawed and the impermanent and what have you, right? So would you say that Wabi Sabi is somewhat getting at the essence of what makes you connect with the DIY aesthetic?
Yeah, I will definitely kind of delve into that. I think you mentioned those 3 points, like incompleteness also, I think, is overlooked, right? It goes back to that whole idea of a conversation. You know, if it doesn't make you feel something that's like, hey, I could take this further, or I could do more with this, or I you know, I could take this in a different direction, or it doesn't make you feel something that isn't necessarily something that like the artist felt. Those are a lot of what I gravitate toward, and some stuff I'd like to kind of replicate or
Okay, cool.
or find my way of adding to that.
Okay, so is there, now you mentioned that you appreciate punk rock too, and the DIY ethos and punk rock kind of are hand in hand, you know, like it looks
I mean,
really
it goes way back, like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie, you know. So I fall down rabbit holes in musical history. So
very good though, as well you should, you know. There's a lot to learn from the musicians of the past. Okay, so the DIY aesthetic, I think, like, when I think of what is great about the DIY aesthetic, right, is that it's like empowering to, you know, the little guy. And when I see things that are made by someone that, you know, they're clearly homemade and they work great, and like they're not things that you could buy or what have you, there's something about that makes me feel like, you know, whoever this creator is like solving a problem that they had, sure, but by choosing that, they're kind of like lighting the way and being like, hey, you know, unplug from, you know, buying everything out of a shipping container. Like you can make your own stuff, and isn't that cool and, you know, fulfilling, right? Is that a similar feeling?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, that's a lot of it right there.
Okay, so these two aesthetics, the DIY aesthetic and the Wabi Sabi aesthetic, there's like in the center of this Venn diagram, there's definitely like, you know, affirming of this world and affirming of the human spirit, and you know, affirming of the deeper connection with the world than perhaps you may have if you were not exposed to art that valued those aesthetics.
Right.
Okay, so Okay, cool. And is there anything else that you feel like aesthetic wise that you feel particularly connected with?
I mean, aesthetic wise, God, I mean, I'm all over the place and I'm still trying to discover that, but I know a lot of all of the other things I try to learn and work into my life. I mean, the natural world has a lot to do with it and that too. So,
Very
you know,
cool.
I
Yeah,
like
Nate.
the idea of bringing that kind of stuff in, right? Like, I think the only track I made to completion had a whole bunch of samples from like sailboat rigging and crap, right? And water sounds and stuff. And that's one of the only things I'm kind of pretty happy about, right? Quality is
Okay, let's talk about that. When you are saying that you're happy about this song that involves these real field recordings that you made, are you saying that in comparison to other work that perhaps was not as sample based?
Not necessarily. In fact, the majority of them were sounds that I'd found other places. I didn't actually do the field recordings and that. So it was mostly just stuff I had pulled together, but it was cool that, I guess, I mean, I think in your methodology and stuff, you talk about the spark and all that.
Yeah.
Where it really just came together and I'll slap something together and I'll try to follow a workflow and I comes out and I'm like, well, that's not what I was trying to say. And that time it started with that and it ended up being something pretty cool. I mean,
yeah, I think usually, like, at least for me, I don't find the creative process as interesting unless I end up at a place that's a little bit different than where I was trying to go. And like, especially, I do always encourage people to train using templates and, to save a lot of racks to their library and everything. And that is definitely really important for getting fast because like a fast producer is a good producer. Right. It's not like fast producers are bad and people who take really long are good. That's not really how quality works in like the musical space, right? So it is important to get fast and to get some degree of automaticity going in your process so that you're not belaboring every decision and burning through your decision fatigue by the time you like even get a sketch out, right? Like the more instinctual you can make it, the easier it is to actually make more decisions in a songwriting process. And the more decisions you can make without getting burned out, that means you're going to get further into your idea and you're going to explore your idea more. And if there's anything wonky about it, you can fix that later or whatever, right? Yeah. It is important to get fast, but at the same time, I don't find it that interesting. Like if I'm working on an album or whatever, or a particularly important track, I might do a timer beat as like a warm up for that using a template. But then when I sit down to actually compose something new, I'll start with the spark as like a way to ask me a question, almost like a creative prompt for a human being instead of like Midjourney. And then I'll like react to that. And it's that back and forth kind of reactive conversation with the work as it takes form that I find more creatively interesting than, just executing perfectly some formula, right? Would you say that is something that resonates with you as workflow wise?
Well, yeah, I mean, hell yeah. Again, I don't have a ton of experience, but and I liked how you said that was a sketch. That's probably where I'm at rather than anything that is finished anything. But it came together, I don't know, an hour and a half or something. I honestly didn't know where it was going. I was just grabbing sounds out of nowhere to fill in. Like, I mean, I didn't have to worry about how that beat was going to lay out or anything. It just kind of slipped all in, right? I mean, I had a feel and it's pretty cool. That's only happened to me a couple of times. And it's kind of what I'm looking for, is trying to be able to recreate that or find that. I'm working on some like habits. I know you preach on the journaling all the time, and yeah, I'm definitely
yeah,
as a primary focus.
It really helps. It really helps.
I mean, and I don't know. Yeah, the a lot of the process and getting quick at it is just because I'm so new. I'm just looking for some guide rails or guardrails to kind of narrow your choices, right? I mean, 'cause
Okay,
you-
well, I have a few suggestions
yeah,
right off the bat for you. But I mean, these are just like in terms of like technical workflow stuff in terms of learning, and then I think I want to circle around just so that
Yeah,
people aren't
absolutely.
waiting too much.
sure.
But one thing that I will say is, as I've grown more experienced as a producer, and as my ears have grown more trained, I've really come to value like preserving the fidelity of my material by processing it as little as possible with destructive processes like
Right.
EQ
Doing that.
and often like I'll try to avoid using compressors too, because compressors can really alter your stereo image and your transient response and things. And like stereo imaging, like those widener plugins and stuff, like I stay away from those. Multiband processing, I stay away from it largely. And really, the highest fidelity process is no process. And a lot of the best music ever has been made with almost nothing on the chain of the sounds, and it's really just getting the right sounds in the right spots and not ruining them,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so like learning to be able to collect sounds that are already good is really the main thing. Like building up a library of sounds that you feel like, okay, if I just get everything out of the way and put this sound up on a pedestal, that gets me,
Right.
and instrument sounds specifically are, when you record them well with like when you go into and you watch like top producers, if you ever watch one of them in a recording session, you'll be watching and like they'll get the person recording, they'll load it up, the person will record, and then they'll just come in and they'll be like, okay, I'm gonna move 1 dB there. That's it. And you're like, you didn't do anything. And like I remember when I was first learning, I was like, where's all the crazy plugins? This person's just scratching the surface. Like, why are they holding back? Blah, 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 blah. But it's like, it's the hardware chain and the room and the nice mic that lead that recording to the point where all it needs is 1 dB of EQ,
Yeah.
and really like learning to, I call it mixing dry, where you're just like really, really letting the composition do the mixing, rather than compressing and everything. You're clipping off any problematic micro peaks, but like shaping things with the envelopes in the sampler, for example, can be extremely effective. And really like because like let's like in the Ableton sampler, like not the simpler, there's a takt time, but there's also an initial value. And if you set the initial value high, then the attack becomes like a short stage that then goes into the decay to the sustain and then the release. And you get this like extra, like you can really control the transient of a drum sound super precisely. And like if you just mouse over the amount of time in the arranger in Ableton, it tells you what the time is in the bottom left of the screen. Then you can be like, oh, the loud portion of this sound is 6 dB too loud for 50 milliseconds. Well, then you can just go into the sampler, set that initial value and stuff before the sustain, and then just make it like, 6 dB quieter for 50 milliseconds. And that will be so much cleaner than doing it with like a compressor, because a compressor is like a reactive process, right? So if I were you, I would focus on really curating the hell out of your collection of sparks, and then thinking like, what are the sounds that are going to make up my percussion section, right? Because really, like, it's important to have these face spark sounds, like maybe a vocal or a hook melody or whatever. And a lot of the time when I'm telling people like, hey, you need to curate these song starts, people will be like, okay, it's going to be a hook idea, right? And like, I need a whole bunch of folders of chorus ideas. But You know, it could be that you know you want to make a song where like all of the drum transients are made out of like vinyl clicks and pops and little errors in playback, and like, you know, making a song that has like that texture might be the spark or whatever, right? So I would say, like, you know, focus on collecting recordings that are going to you know, provide like style and texture, right? Such as like vinyl clicks and pops, or like, you know, like if you take like a guitar pick and kind of like rub it down the strings when it's like plugged in really loud, and you get those like like grunting, crunching noises out of the pickup and stuff. Like those sorts of texture sounds would be good to collect. And then also, of course, you know, going back through your recordings as you know, musician who can play instruments, I'm sure you have many recordings of like a track at a time, or like just jamming out on a single instrument. Especially if you listen to lo-fi hip hop, a lot of the best lo-fi hip hop is made when you sample someone who's like maybe not even playing to a metronome. You know, they're just like feeling themselves with an instrument, kind of just like quietly playing, and like maybe, you know, in a wabi-sabi sort of a way, when you sample that non-synced playing, you know, you'll have your cuts will land on like the 1, 2, 3, 4 of the beat. But what it cuts, there might be 2 or 3 hits there that have like an asymmetric timing that are going to kind of like provide a little bit of wonkiness, etc., right? So getting these like little fragments of solo melodic performances, like be digging for like texture and tone within all of the solo melodic performances. And then you should also be really focusing on like, you know, what can I use instead of a snare, especially because like a snare is like the nose on a face, you know? You really take it for granted. But when snares are vanilla, the whole fucking thing is vanilla. Like straight up. And snares are like, if you go from era to era and listen to the different snares, snares are what makes something sound dated, like big time, you know? So be focusing on like, what are interesting ways I can make a snare that are not like specifically a snare. And if you check out bands like Coco Rosie, for example, they're really cool. It's like these 2 sisters, and they do kind of like acoustic folk music, but a lot of the instruments that they play are like children's toys. And like, you know, they'll be like, you know, carefully playing it and stuff, but like the sounds that they're making might be like these little like squeaky hinge on some little like plastic thing, and you can kind of hear it. It's just got this like weird nostalgic kind of texture, right? But start thinking about like, what can I use for percussion that's not going to be like baddest drum pack ever, multi-mic drum kits with all the balls, you know, like that shit sounds so fucking boring. Like it really does. If you use the same tools that everyone else has, and like think of like, you know, like if you're like, okay, well, I know it has to have drums, but my music's about this, so I'm just going to use this like bullshit I got off of a sample pack just as a placeholder while I write the rest of the song. It's like, fuck that. No placeholder sounds ever. Like if a sound is some old off the shelf bullshit that you bought at some fucking store and you're not in love with it, don't put it in. Like if it's something that you got off the shelf and you're like, I'm in love with this. This is me. I'm going to rock the shit out of this. It's the same thing with like when you buy a piece of clothing. Like you might buy a piece of mass-produced clothing that you're utterly in love with. And you're like, you know, people are going to have to tell me to stop wearing this. You know, if it's that kind of a thing, then yeah, off the shelf is great. Don't change anything about it. In it goes. But using off the shelf sounds just because you feel that they should be there, or you feel that like that's the correct way to do things, fuck that, right? So think about like, what are the roles of the sounds that you want in your music? You're going to need some kind of a low percussion sound. You're going to need some kind of a mid percussion sound and some kind of a high percussion sound that can go faster. You're probably going to need things that go psh and splash or whatever, but it's like, does it have to be a kick? Does it have to be a snare? Does it have to be a cymbal? Does it have to be, you know, white noise risers? Not necessarily, right? So as we come into the course, you know, I want you to keep, you know, like think about Wabi Sabi and the DIY ethos, etc., and like list out artists and people that you've been inspired by that you feel really exemplify the aesthetics and the connection with music that makes you just feel like this is why I do this, you know? And there's different kind of like ways of analyzing their style, but I want you to like think about it in your own dimensions, like what's important to you. You know, what does their visual branding look like? What does their audio branding look like? What's in their music? What's not in their music? What do the artist names make you think of? Like, are people using their real names? Are they like, you know, Tantalizing Walrus, or like what the fuck kind of names are you into, etc. And really, like, if you make like kind of a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet type arrangement where it's like style dimensions, and then literally like just print out a bunch of those or just write those dimensions down on a piece of paper, and then find like what your heroes are and fill out their style dimensions on like a character sheet kind of thing. And then as you have a few, you've like asked the same pointed questions across those inspirations, you'll start to notice kind of commonalities and stuff, and you're going to be looking for things in common that you wish to adopt. And then if you're going to make your music interesting, you're going to need to pick at least one thing that they all do that you're going to never do, right? So so start thinking in that way, and then definitely like sounds, getting that collection of sounds, that collection of textures, that palette, but especially percussion. So much of style comes from percussion. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on now to Mark. Mark, could you please unmute, and then we will come back around at the end. But yeah, welcome, Mark. So how much of that did you catch?
What you just said to Scott?
Yeah, did you get like with the sonic architecture, like what's in and outside of the space? Okay,
I can definitely like echo some of the things that Scott was saying about kind of adding to the conversation, and I could definitely like agree with some of the things that Scott was saying.
Okay, well, why don't you tell me a little bit about like kind of where you're coming from musically, and about what your vision is, because the more clear you can get about this vision and its aesthetic dimensions, especially, the more clear you can get about that, the easier a time everything else is.
Yeah, so I mean, my first love is drum and bass.
Fuck
and
yeah!
So I used to I really loved watching Andy C play. So that kind of putting like 3 or 4 tracks together, that kind of aesthetic, and then I've been using your APC template for
sick,
probably over 10 years now. I used the original APC template, and then I modified it for the APC2.
Sick.
And so, having like those 4 tracks and kind of bringing in other people's tracks, as well as stuff that I've been making myself, like edits, kind of almost like a bass music jam band. Like that's kind of like that kind of aesthetic. And then as it going on to like production kind of stuff, I've been making stuff for over 10 years on and off. And for a while I was like really serious about making it sound like the stuff that was out there, but then I'd be digging for like music, and some of the stuff, a lot of the stuff out there wasn't fitting what like we wanted to play. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to start, you know, kind of moving down that route and trying to make stuff that kind of sounds like what we like to play. And then, you know, I was bartending for a while, so when I'd come home from the bar, I would just sit there for a few hours and kind of download like everything, you know, all the emotion, all of the music I've been listening to that night, and didn't really care too much about the outcome of that. And it was a really good exercise because I feel like I've kind of developed like a bit of my own style of doing things. And, you know, you were talking about sparks. Like, I feel like I do that a lot. I don't have any trouble like starting a track. I feel like I could make tracks all day long. It's more the like the second part of it where it's like I can make like the beginning of the song all the way to like the breakdown, and then I guess I lose interest in it. I don't know, or maybe like, you know, like you were saying, like the kind of the timer on the fuse, like kind of, you know, and the stuff that I have made has been that I've really liked has been kind of in like 1 or 2 sessions. And when 2020 hit, like I took Seth's the approach, and that was really good in kind of taking some of the stuff I had already and making new stuff, and just kind of, you know, getting like the low end kind of more solidified. And that's when I kind of started to get like a little bit more serious. I was like, okay, like, you know, I was started playing stuff to other people, and they were like, "You made this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I made this." So
sick.
that was
It's a good place to be.
like, oh, okay, like I'm doing it, you know. And then you know, we had the conversation like not too long ago about like the NerdSec, and then I saw you doing some like track feedback stuff, and I was like, oh, I need to, you know, connect with Dylan, because I heard you just talking about, you know, ways of improving tracks, and I was like, I need, you know, something like that.
Word. Well, definitely get at me with some of the tracks, like in either the music for feedback area of the Discord, if you want to do it publicly, or if you're like, you know, you're sensitive for whatever reason, you can add me and DM me. Well, I mean, there's lots of tracks that like I can't show anybody. If I'm working with like a big artist, it's totally sensitive. Like I can't expose that to anything, you know? But yeah, so if you're working on something that's more sensitive, or if you're comfortable either way, but yeah, get at me. I'd love to check it out. And then like in terms of like the style that you have in mind, it does seem like you have a pretty specific vision of your style. I was hoping that you could elaborate on that a little bit more, and like especially when it comes to, you know, where is this music appropriate to who, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like, you know, like dance floor bass music for the most part. I mean, I do make a bunch of other stuff that is like kind of more chill and like definitely not for that arena, but that's the stuff that I really love, you know, whether that be like drum and bass stuff, kind of more like wubby stuff, and even like I make some housey stuff as well. So it's kind of across the board. And, you know, whenever we played sets, like it's always kind of melding through those things. Not so much house, like I'd like to kind of have like a, you know, a house side project, because it doesn't always work in the bass music set.
Oh yeah, and house audiences, they're like, it's like if you do something that's not house, it's like blasphemy.
right, exactly, yeah. So yeah, I'd like to have like little side projects for that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at like there are a lot of artists who are kind of who come from that drum and bass space that can still, you know, make 4 on the floor music and have it make sense, you know, like if you go see like Imanu or Bunshin, or like a lot of the Vision Radio guys, like you wouldn't really think of them as house artists, but they definitely, like some, you know, especially Imanu, like a lot of his biggest, most popular releases are house, you know, or like Apache. You don't think of Apache as like a house artist, but he has a lot of really, you know, big house songs. And there is kind of a way to position your brand where you can do both, but usually, like, especially when it comes to dance music, the artists who successfully get there, it's like they're usually kind of known for one thing first, and then after becoming wildly successful, they're like, okay, well, I think I'm going to take a risk and expand my genre
Right.
catalog here, but it is a risk, right? So like, there's this book called Positioning that is really great. It's by this guy Al Rees, Rees, I think. Basically, that book, it talks about how for every category of thing in the mind of the public, there's like a ladder of what the accepted best version of that thing is, and then down the ladder, right? So for like cars, you'd have like really expensive supercars up here, and then you'd have the like, supercars for people who don't know from supercars, and then you'd have like, expensive luxury cars, and then like luxury looking cars that suck, and then like normal cars, and blah, blah, blah. And people will have those brands kind of like on that ladder. And it's really hard, like there are certain brands like Kleenex or Facebook where their name is synonymous with the category of thing that they rule, the chrono or niche or whatever it is. And that name is that niche, like you don't say, pass me a disposable tissue. Most of the time you'd say, pass me a Kleenex to someone, or at least in North America. And this is kind of like drives the diversification of style to a great degree, right? Because like, let's say that you want to become known as a turntablist, in so many people's minds, Qbert is always the best DMC battle scratch DJ because, he won so many times they had to make him stop, and, and then it's just like now, like when you watch new DMCs, there are like battle DJs who are doing crazy stuff that Qbert like never would have come up with, and but in so many people's minds, it's like that turntablist category, Qbert is the all-time GOAT forever. And like, especially people who only have like a passing interest in turntablism, it's really hard to kind of like be able to step, because the domination was so complete, right? And it's like that with every genre of music and every genre of thing. So you have artists like seeking to further individuate what specific ladder it is that they're on so that they can be the top of that ladder, right? And when you do have a good position at the top of one of those ladders, the tendency is to try and use your existing status as like, the top of one ladder to see if you can get another one going. And these are what's known as like brand extensions. And while it is not impossible to have a brand extension, for example, Yamaha make motorcycles, and they're also very successful at making pianos. You don't think they're crappy at making piano. You're not like, what's a motorcycle company doing making pianos, right? So it's not unheard of, just like Imanu was able to do drum and bass and house music successfully. But it is kind of like, it is something to be aware of. And I've kind of come to the realization that these, when artists start a second alias, it's usually to protect the focus of their main alias rather than like, oh, I'm going to roll the dice again with this new name. Maybe it'll catch on. It's more like, how do I stop myself from diluting my focus and losing my position, my hard fought position on that ladder. Right. So with electronic music, especially when it comes to something like drum and bass, there is, of course, like in every genre, there is always an infinite amount of possible ways you can take something. But being the first person to find one of those new ladders is really the name of the game when it comes to like, the increasingly specific subgenres of electronic music, right? So, to create that thinking carefully about like your style manifesto, like, you know, what are the rules of this style that you're creating for yourself? What are you going to always do? And most importantly, what are you going to never do? You know, and if you want to stand out in a field like drum and bass, it's an old genre, and many have tried to turn it on its head, but it's not impossible. You know, like Camo and Crooked came in with that Mosaic album like 30 years into drum and bass and completely made it like, what is everybody else doing? Are they even trying? You know, like it is possible to shake things up. It's just like figuring out what rules you're going to pick a fight with, you know, is kind of the most important thing with electronic music. Like figure out the thing that everybody's doing and cross it off your list every time, you know? So when you're thinking of style in electronic music, that's really the way to think about it. You know, like get your list of influences together. Definitely watch the Everything is a Remix documentary if you've not already. That documentary is like, it really helps you to understand like how creativity works, like especially at a cultural level. But yeah, watch Everything is a Remix, and then keep in mind the idea of creating a style manifesto, and, you know, assemble your list of you know, influences. And when you do those Dungeons and Dragons style character sheets on your musical influences, like what's their visual dimension like, what's their you know, audio dimensions like, what's their name like, what's this, that, and the other thing, and you run that across many of your musical heroes, you'll be able to kind of like deconstruct the elements of the styles that inspire you in a kind of like modular Lego like format, and you'll have like something you can look at and stuff. But thinking very carefully about that stuff, like who is going to be in, you know, your imaginary round table or your like pantheon of style, like who are those artists, what specifically is it about them that you connect with, and is there something that they all do that you could cross off your list, right? So I want you to start thinking about those questions, and then when we come around later, I definitely want to like revisit that topic with each of you. But in terms of mixing and stuff and finishing things, like the dry mix style where you like nail everything with as few plugins as possible, no EQ unless absolutely necessary, especially, you know, using clippers to cut off the peaks and gain stage everything, you know, in the most transparent way possible, just so you can't even hear that the peaks have been cut off. Everything sounds totally transparent. All the levels are under control. Mixing like that is, you know, it's one of the first things that we're going to cover in the producer's path, because if you're gain staging and leveling and your like skill at doing the dry mix is not there, everything else that you do is going to suck. And you're going to be like, maybe I suck. And it's like, no, the volume levels are all over the place. You don't suck. Your volume levels are a mess, you know? So until you can like just get cool pieces of audio and get their relative volumes to make sense, there's like not much else that can be done. So we're going to focus on the dry mix, like pretty much right away. And then there's a lot of workflows. Like a lot of the course is about workflows, but getting like really specific about like who those artists are. Because like Andy C, for example, like what era of Andy C? He's sounded a lot of ways over the years, you know, it was
more his mixing style. Like that was the thing that like really got me. I mean, there's definitely like plenty of other artists that I like their style, but you know, it was more just the way that he presented, you know, his mixes.
Yeah, he's excellent live. And he's pretty full on. AMC is a beast like that too.
He's like Andy C too.
Yeah, I'm just like, dude, how do you even like practice this? Like there's the mixes, like it'll be like a double into a double into a double into a triple, and I'm just like it's crazy. It's like cocaine was a person. Like I'm just like, how do you go that fast?
We call him a mountain of cocaine. That's AMC.
That's amazing. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone in being
No,
like,
no,
how
no,
is
not
this
at all.
guy so on all the time? That's very funny. That's very funny. Well, big ups to AMC. I'm really excited. Okay, cool. But yeah, because like those DJs too, they play a lot of different. Like, there's a wide variety of music that has made it onto the playlist of like top drum and bass DJs. They play all different kinds of, all different kinds of genres and everything. So it's really important to get like super specific about, producers, emotions. I often find it useful to think like, okay, if my music project was a color, what color would it be? If my music project was an animal, what animal would it be? If my music project was a place, what place would it be? What car would it be? What planet in the solar system would it be? Like all those kind of cheesy third grade questions or whatever, like that aren't really that useful in adult life. Like no one really cares what my favorite color is, but they do become very important when you're creating a brand and when you're creating a artistic focus. And like the more specific you can be about that, the more you can because it's like, your brand doesn't have to be like you standing on stage naked going, here I am, like there can be a degree of artifice to it. And, it's like when an actor is really good at playing a villain, like, they're not coming off stage and like eating babies, like it's an act. It's fun. And it's like, it's interesting, so don't get too caught up and be like, does this express what the little 5-year-old version of me wanted when they thought about being a musician? But just think like, is there enough meat on the bone that I can be constantly iterating within this box without getting bored or feeling like this isn't me, And you can change your style and you can change your brand, and it's normal for people to outgrow a style or outgrow a brand. And many of the best artists will have like eras of their style developing, so it doesn't have to be forever. But if you can get one that you love enough to be like, I'm gonna put a ring on it, that's really what you're after, is like, how can you create a box where there is enough fulfillment in this box that you can iterate within this structure until you wear yourself out. Like you need to be able to envision 10 albums inside that box without getting bored. Like, can you write 10 albums of music in this box? All right. So figuring out what's that box that you're going to, because following rules ruins your music more when you are following them unconsciously, right? And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't want to listen to too much of like my immediate competition in genre X because I feel like that'll like pollute my creativity. There are a lot of people that have that kind of an idea about it. But when you study the art that makes you excited and you analyze it in terms of specific dimensions where you're like, okay, this is critical listening. Like, I'm not just like, this song makes me feel like Superman. It's like, why? What is this song doing that other songs aren't? Specifically, write it out, analyze it, put on other music, be like, what is the difference? Like, compare until you can outline, like, specifically for yourself what that difference is. Until you really analyze with a critical ear, the tendency is to follow the kind of like unconscious archetype of whatever you think that genre is. And if you're just trying to make good drum and bass, well, what's good drum and bass? It's drum and bass that sounds like this internal, like averaged archetype where you like take all of the songs that you thought were good at drum and bass, average them all out like that most attractive face graphic that you're always seeing on social media. And then you're like, that's the target down the middle, right? That's what trying to make good music is. And until you are specific about getting those rules out of your unconscious, out of the people you're studying, out of whatever, and getting them somewhere where you can look at them and decide which ones to keep or not, you're more likely to be unconsciously following rules that will make your music far more boring than if you were actively emulating any of your heroes, right? So that fear, like, don't fear studying the artists that you love, and don't fear that. A lot of the best musicians make like track recreations. Like, they're not even trying to just understand the track, like they're trying to make it themselves. I mean, Hunter S. Thompson once like wrote all of Moby Dick on his typewriter because he wanted to know what it felt like to write a great book. Like, he didn't change the letter. He just typed it. He wanted to feel a great book coming out of his hands, so don't fear studying, and get those people on a list. And then the more specific you can get about examples of their work, etc. And then at the same time, you got to think carefully about what pisses you off as much as possible. And over time, like, if you've not been super clear about what your name is, etc., a lot of the time, like, that's not a decision you make like super quick. I want to talk to you all about like names and stuff at the end. But start curating that list, and then, sparks, and then textures. And drums are especially important in drum bass. Like, anytime you're making electronic music, it's basically a competition to have the coolest drums. Like, they are so fucking important. And that's why like every genre of dance music is categorized by beat structure and BPM. It's always the drums first. And people forget that because you can just go buy some fucking drum pack on Splice and you're like, well, that's sorted. And it's like, is it? What does this say about you other than that you're lazy? So like, put some time and thought into it. You can use samples off Splice. You can use commercial sounds if you like them enough that you're like, this snare is fucking me. This is a hill I will die on. Then go for it. If you feel that strongly about that snare, use it. But figuring out, how can you, it's the designers who ask, what is a chair even, that sell the chair for $10,000? Like, you need to question fundamental assumptions about the genres and about the way things are done. All right. So the more you can get those out, the better. All right, cool. So we'll come back around in a little bit. Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate it. Okay, so up next we have Jason. So I'm just going to pin you to the top here. Boop. All right. You're pinned. Okay, so same first question, right? We're creating emotional architecture. There is a stage that your music creates that there's going to be a lot of the style and personality is going to be in that set. Think about it like the set for a play or the set for a dance performance. Like, it's like a space that there may be an emotion and a vibe to that space, and then there are characters within that space. So when you're explaining your style, think about it in terms of creating a cultural space an emotional space for characters. What type of space? What type of characters?
Am I unmuted first off?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I feel like my background as a live sound engineer has kind of warped me these past 12 years. I've spent so much time. I feel like I've gotten in a bit of a rabbit hole, like Scott mentioned with Ableton. I've gotten in a rabbit hole just in sound design with Logic, and also saying, oh, well, I'm a live sound engineer. I've learned to understand frequencies in a live environment, and let me play with mixing these sounds together. Unfortunately, I feel like I got really stuck in. You've mentioned more gear, more problems in a couple of your videos. And I feel like there's been times I've like overemphasized the importance of getting this gear to work with Logic or to be in sync with Logic. And by the way, no offense if anyone uses Logic, but I'm so happy to not be using it and have moved on to Ableton thanks to stumbling onto some of your videos. I'm really loving Ableton so
Yeah,
far.
it's my fave too. I did a whole album with Logic though. Like I used Logic. It's cool.
It is cool. I love ES2. And I know there's an artist from Pittsburgh that I spoke with, and he really used ES2, and I think that's part of the reason I thought his music was so awesome. I'm like, whoa, I should work only in Logic, and wow, 10 years have gone by, you know. Also, I did some schooling, and I was taught with Logic, you know, from that school. Anyway, I feel like I've overlooked the emotional in the characters, the aesthetic part, and just looked at technical things and listened for that and try to find my own sounds in that, but maybe only with my ears and not so much with, I don't know if you'd say your spirit or who you really are.
I mean, it's more getting specific about the aesthetics rather than it reflecting an authentic or deeper level of self, because any kind of piece of art is going to mean different things to different people at different times, you know? And there's like, for example, a lot of actors that play the good guy characters in films and television and stuff. Well, you know, we have this kind of like delusion that if someone is a tall, good-looking Caucasian man who's charming and funny on the spot and speaks unaccented American English, well, they must be a morally good protagonist in the universe. But usually, when you know, the swiftest way to ruin someone is to give them everything they want. And when people are really attractive and they're given everything they want all the time, usually it turns them into monsters. And when you meet these people who play the good guy all the time, and then you meet them in real life, and you're like, oh God, this person's horrible. Does it make their art like less legitimate that they're horrible, but they're really good at pretending to be good? Like, does that make them worse or better as actors? Does that even matter? Right? Like, I think they're better actors if they're good at hiding they're a piece of shit. But then like, I don't know, like, does it, like, where does that leave you there? Like, does it matter? No, the only thing that matters is your experience of watching their films or television or whatever. Like their character, like if you knew too much about them, it might put you off of watching anything they've done. But until that point, the only thing that matters is their actual, like, you know, the stories that they're in and whether that you connect with that performance or not. Right. So the more you can like let go of the idea of the necessity for music to be authentic or express your authentic self, right? Style is more about being specific about something than it is about that particular thing, you know? And there's so many examples of like an artist where like, you know, their name will be like Defect or like Stinky Butthole or something, and they have this like awesome successful career, you know. And it's like it doesn't, like, it's not so much like, because there's someone out there, like there's nothing in the world that there's not someone who fucking loves that thing. You know, there's nothing like that. Like even like getting kicked in the nuts. Like I would hate to get kicked in the nuts really hard by someone wearing a spiky boot, but there's people who pay great money for that shit, you know? So like whether it's authentic or not is kind of beside the point. There is an audience for most things if they are like a potent form of that thing, you know? And it's more just about achieving like a potent form of whatever thing. And there are going to be things that you're like, okay, like, wow, I could do this. I could this is a style that like I can see myself not getting bored with, is a lot more important than this is a style that like accurately portrays my character to the world. Because portraying your character accurately is like beside the fucking point when it comes to art. You know, like your art, there's a level in which it's about you in that you're what you genuinely fuck with always needs to be the guide. Like
Right.
if you don't genuinely fuck with it, don't do it, because there's a finite lifespan on that.
Right.
You're gonna get to the point where you're like, you know what, this isn't giving me what I need as a creator anymore. I'm over it. Like this, it was fun doing this. Now it's not fun, whatever. Right? That's that's more like finding a style that you feel like I could live here. I could set up shop. This is something I can sink my teeth into. Like, I'm into this. That is much more important than accurately telling us your inner life or emotional
Oh,
world.
that's great to hear. I feel like I have artists in genres. I'm not so great with labels of genres, but artists for sure. Like, yes, I could live in this if I can get my workflow to reflect things like this. If I can get my mixes, to, I guess, workflow is huge for me. I feel like organization. I've been so ignorant to tagging sounds and
Yeah.
organizing drum racks.
And just get in the habit of saving things with a name that you're going to remember. That's far more important than putting them in folders or whatever. Because whenever I'm
Right.
loading anything, it's just Command F, type the name of the thing, down arrow, enter. I don't even touch the mouse when I'm loading shit. And it's like, the faster you can get, just Command F, down arrow, that option, and just enter. Like, that is so much faster than dragging your mouse across the screen and going through
Nice.
folders and blah, 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 blah. And like that kind of folder hierarchy, like meticulous stuff, like that used to be a really big deal, like back in the days of like hardware samplers and stuff. But computers have this instantaneous search now, and Ableton like indexes everything. This sound similarity search is amazing, etc.
The
So
color tagging,
I don't use that. I don't use anything about the browser. Just Command F. That's it.
nice.
That's all you
Okay.
need. That's all the organization you need. Just remember to name things regularly and get in the habit of saving them often.
Right.
And then in every project folder, make a subfolder called saved stuff, and be constantly dragging anything cool that happens into there, or anything that you want to freeze and flatten and get rid of, drag it into there as a single track. And then you can drag like single tracks out. You could drag presets out, whatever. Just every project folder needs a saved stuff subfolder. Get into that
Nice.
habit, and then just remember to naming, just name things in a memorable way.
Awesome.
Right. Yeah, that's all you really like. Organization is it's just like the fact that you've named them in a memorable way. That's all the organization you really need. The rest is covered. There's videos that talk about that. But in terms of style, like, why don't you talk a little bit about like what sort of aesthetics speak to you? Like what, like beyond like the notes and the instruments and the genres and stuff, like what aesthetic speaks to you? Like what is inside or outside of the musical room?
I don't know why I've been trying to figure out how to answer that question the whole time, and I'm having a hard time. It's like cinematic sounds, or like
Good.
drum and bass, future bass is what's coming to my mind. Like, I love full spectrum. Like, I love when drums and bass utilize the whole spectrum of a mix. And then there's layers of a bass, that come in and out like puzzle pieces.
Okay, this is all
and then-
good. See, the question is supposed to be intentionally vague and obtuse, because it's there to make you not know the answer. And because
Right.
you don't know the answer, because you haven't been asked it in that way, that makes you think about it properly.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're doing great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I feel like I like when people can compose well with layers of sounds and bring them in and out for this section. But then in another section, like your C section, we don't use those second snares. And we don't use the second, like maybe there's 4 layers of bass that are taking turns, and then we don't use that in the C section, but or in the B section, something like that. I don't know.
Okay, well, these are like workflow things that we're gonna go over in the rest of the course material. But in terms of today, like you were a lot warmer when you're like, okay, I like things to be cinematic. You know, if there's genres that you're inspired by, like the layered basses and like full spectrum sounds, those are like kind of aesthetic things. You know, let's kind of keep more in the aesthetic dimension. So, do you like when sounds like, I know a lot of people who are into mixing or went to school for it. A lot of the time, you know, people will like styles of mixing that take into account psychoacoustic phenomena to make like a realistic sort of a space. And then there are people that are like, you know, like Flume, for example, that will like, you know, intentionally get as absurd with the way things violate your traditional notions of the way space is supposed to operate in an audio realm, like on purpose, you know? So like how realistic a space do you like in your mixes, for example?
Me personally, you're asking.
Yeah, style wise. Like, do you like music that is mixed as though it's a realistic space or an unrealistic space?
I suppose I could like both. I've never really thought when I listen to my favorite artists, I don't really think realistic or unrealistic. But I think when I think cinematic, that kind of makes it seem more unrealistic sometimes. I like huge reverbs, but I don't want to overuse them.
Yeah.
You know? You can't overuse, then it just becomes kind of meaningless.
Okay, how about the how about minimalism? Is that an aesthetic thing that speaks to you?
Not so much. I've never really been drawn so much to minimalism. I mean, when I hear that word, it makes me think of like Aphex Twin.
Really? He's like some of the least minimal music. I mean, I guess he has a few that are minimal, but like a lot of that shit's like hectic edits, man, like all day, like brain fry.
I think like hectic minimalism. Yeah, you're right. It's not really minimalistic in the way of thinking or.
Okay, well, just think like, you know, a minimalistic piece of art would be like a giant black sphere.
Definitely not Aphex Twin.
You know, that's like in terms of like traditional minimalism, it's like almost like challenging levels of lack of detail, you know? So, but yeah, so, but think in terms of like, okay, so like, what do you like a variety of emotion in your music? Do you like coherent narratives? Do you like music that's played by instruments? Do you like music that is, you know, feels abstract and mechanical? Do you like the human aesthetic? Do you like perfection? Do you like math in your music? These sorts of things will
Very
really
much
help you too.
Mechanical.
Okay.
My ears, I've always had a thing. I think growing up playing drums in a tiny bedroom with punk musicians covering songs, I got to a point where I went to recording school and I'm like, this room sounds horrible. These drums sound horrible. These cheap cymbals sound terrible. I can't listen. I want a nice drum kit, and I never got that drum kit. I never got a nice space to play it, a nice drum kit. And that's part of why I started to love working on electronic music so much by myself, because I couldn't afford a nice practice space with anyone when I moved to Pittsburgh. All the practice spaces were $400 and up, and I didn't even have a nice drum kit. And I wouldn't even want to take a nice drum kit to that place, you know, like around here, and risk it being taken, you know. Besides the point, maybe I'm drifting, but yeah, that's part. I think other things are just how I coped with stress when I was younger and changing some bad habits. Certain things appealed to my ears, and they helped me heal from things. And
okay, that's a very good thread to pull on, because, you know, like, I mean, the goal, I think, with all of this and with all of your musical styles, right, is, you know, that to create medicine, you know, because music properly understood is medicine. And you know, medicine is a broad field. You know, there may be some times when you need certain types of medicine, and there may be other times when you need other types of medicine. You know, sometimes ice cream can have a medical effect on your psychology. You know,
Right.
it's not always about what's strictly speaking good or bad for you. It's about what fills a need that improves your health and your mental health, especially in different ways. And, you know, there may be times when you need to listen to the saddest music in the world so you feel less sad. You know, is that sad that someone made art that's sad? Like, no, not necessarily, right? So when, you know, a lot of the stuff that I want you to kind of think about before we kind of come back around is, you know, what are the specific artists that you felt their music had a medicinal effect on your life or a transformative effect on your life? And
sure.
usually the artists where you can recall like a specific moment of transformation or a specific moment of medicinal effect, when you start teasing apart, like, you know, like where you're analyzing in whatever system of analysis you want to make. But like, you know, I would say, you know, think about who those artists are and think about what kind of dimensions of style you want to use to compare them to each other, you know, because like your brand, right? Your brand isn't just like, hey, let's put a fucking cartoon fucking marshmallow helmet on and like all the kids that love me, like great branding, you know, like there's more to it than that. Your brand is everything in the mind of the audience or the public that distinguishes your project from the musical project of someone else, right? So it's like, you know, who are you? Where are you from? What were you influenced by? For sure, very important ingredients in a brand, and those will always be a part of every brand of every artist. But there's also like, you know, what sorts of emotions are you interested in exploring? What sorts of emotions are you good at exploring? Like I have one friend who makes super sad music, and he is like one of the goofiest, happiest people I have ever met. And he's like never really depressed or whatever. He just really likes the aesthetics of sad boy music. And he's like, yeah, I love making sad boy music. I'm a big old sad boy, you know? And it's really funny that it's like that, but for some people that's the way it is, you know? So it's like, which is again why I'm like, you know, when you're finding a style, I think, and it's just like notions of doing good music and notions of like authentic expression of self are usually more counterproductive than they are productive. It's more about like finding something that's like specific, that is where you're like, hey, this is that sweet spot between like what I'm good at and what other people like it when I do it and what I find fulfilling at a personal level. There's usually a sweet spot there. But if you're going to start with any of those, you have to start with what you find fulfilling at a personal level. Because if that fundamental piece of the pyramid is not there, the whole rest of the house of cards falls over, right? So it's like what you find fulfilling, anything that you don't find fulfilling, fucking disqualified. Like just instant disqualification. And then you build up from there through the dimensions of like, what am I good at doing? That's usually second. And then later comes the audience. Like you don't put the audience's concerns first. They come fucking last. Like it has to be something that you find fulfilling and tempered with that which you are good at, because you'll find, you may find as you develop your repertoire of techniques, you'll be like, oh man, like I can really hit a pocket when it comes to this particular style of music. What I want to do might be like, you know, maybe you want to write symphonies, or like maybe you want to do fucking like crazy performance art. And it's just like, you're just not that great at it. And other people don't really give a shit. You know, like the thing that is the best, it might not necessarily be the thing that you love the best. But it's like, you know, it is ultimately your decision, you know, like I mean, have you ever read the Motley Crue book?
No.
Okay. It's great. They're horrible people, but the book is great. And there's basically the overarching narrative of the story is like, Nikki Sixx is blasted on heroin or whatever. In a moment of clarity, he like confesses to Tommy. I think they're in Japan. He confesses to Tommy Lee that he's like, oh, we're like the McDonald's of rock and roll. And Tommy Lee's like super cut up about this, and he's like, I want to be more than the McDonald's of rock and roll. We gotta be more. We need a DJ and a drum machine and like all this other shit to show people that we're not just that. And like, years and years of them just getting further and further astray, just trying to fight who they are. And then eventually they're all like, oh, we need money. We suck at other stuff. Let's just be the McDonald's of rock and roll. And then they come back and they fucking serve us up a Big Mac of guitar and drums and hair, and we love them for it, So it's like, figuring out something that you find fulfilling and that you dig enough to actually do, like when you're going to carve out a lane, it's got to be something that's cool enough that you're like, I can do this, I can keep iterating and never run out of ideas with this, and it's got to be something that you make it easy for yourself, because if you are pushing yourself to the very fucking limit of your own sanity every time you make a track and then you put it out and it's your old record 2 months later, people are like, oh yeah, I heard that one. That's the old one, right? Like that shit kills me. Like when you put out an album and then in 2 months, someone's like, oh, is that your old album? I'm like, fuck you! That was 2 months ago! There's fucking almost 20 tracks on that motherfucker. Like, it's like, so you want to make something that it's like, you're good at making it and it comes out fairly naturally, as well as something that you find fulfilling enough to do and not be like, this is shitty, this is formula, I'm over it, I can't fucking do this anymore, gag me. And then usually when you find something that you are like called to do and that you're basically like, you're good enough at it that you're not going to kill yourself doing it again and again, usually other people are going to just like that thing. And you don't really have to think about gussying it up for them or whatever, it's like, if it's something that that lights you up and you're like, I fucking love doing this, I'm good at this. Like, we love seeing people do shit that they love and that they're good at. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll watch like fucking crazy shit. Like, there's a show, Champions, where they just interview people who are like crazy good at ridiculous shit, like fucking the cheese chasing in England, where they run down this like hill chasing a cheese and like half of them get like heinous injuries. And there are people that like live for that. They love it so much. They like roll this wheel of cheese down a hill and like 400 people run down this really steep hill. And there's a version of it in Japan where they're like riding these giant logs down a hill and like half of them get like horrifying injuries, but because it has some like cultural significance, the government's not like, yeah, could you guys not all break your faces at the same day? I don't know. It's mystifying, but I would never do that shit. But when I watched that documentary, I'm like, this is great. Like, I love that these people live for this like so much, and I can still like vicariously live through them because they're doing something that they're passionate about, and they're decent enough at it that they're like, this is fulfilling for me, so you'll get on board from the natural vibe that someone exudes when they're doing some shit that they love, that they're good at. Right. So usually beyond that, you don't really have to do much to make it work with an audience. But if you're like, yo, my most authentic music that I can make is like fucking, I don't know, like breakcore remixes of fucking Justin Bieber all day, like there may be a limited audience for that. You might be like usually people who like breakcore not so into Justin Bieber, like that might be like, you might be like, but this is me, I need this, and it's, but and that's only when that comes in. Like, if it's something that the public finds truly unpalatable, eventually that can wear on you, but usually that comes last. Like, that's kind of like, that's like one of those things where like, like if you've never thought about mixing, you're kind of disqualified. There are certain things about style that can be disqualifying, but like, as long as you're not hitting one of those, you're probably fine. Usually the first two, like find something that you love doing enough to like just fucking go down that rabbit hole, like in a rabbit hole that you can imagine 10 albums worth of interesting in that rabbit hole. And then, you know, it's got to not be impossible for you. And then beyond that, other people have to not hate it. You know, some people hating it is good. But if like 99% of people hate it, it's a real special soul who can keep making art that like 99% of people hate, you know, and I have a deep admiration for them. I don't have the fortitude for that. There are some who do, who are like, I'm going to make artists or music that like 99.9% of people have a viscerally negative reaction to. And like, I like that. There are people that are like that. Like Otto von Schirach is like that. He made this EP called the Pukology EP that is like 100% of every recording on the entire album is made from samples of his fans throwing up that they sent him. And like all the drums, everything is like micro sampled, like single cycle waveforms of just like puking. Like, I mean, I like that it exists, you know? I've made it through 2 of the songs at once, but I still hold that piece of art in a very high esteem. Like, I think it's a special piece of art. I'm not listening to it all day, but it's like special as a piece of work, and he's very skilled, and I'm not going to say he's wrong for doing that, you know? Like that's it. And there's going to be someone out there that like the Pukology EP is the soul medicine they need, right? There will be someone who like that because it's so potent and so different. There will be someone who finds some kind of a medical use for that music.
Right.
You know, just because of its potency and its uniqueness. And like Otto von Schirach is definitely number 1 on the Pukology brand totem, like the ladder, you know, like I can't think of anyone who's better at that than him.
Right.
You know? So it's like, it just depends. But yeah, but you can, it's fine to put the audience last. And in fact, usually it's a good idea to put the audience last, because when you try to write for the masses, you end up going for that like unconsciously followed archetype, like down the middle of the genre template, boring ass crap that an AI can make. You know, like if you want to make music that requires a human being to make it, then, you know, you're going to have to aim not for the middle, you know? So, figuring out what it is, what that human dimension is that you are going to bring to it, and what it is that like, you know, don't just list a bunch of artists you like, figure out why you like them, figure out what makes them different, because what makes you different is what your brand is, you know, and it's in the mind of the public, that set of characteristics. And it's that focus, you know, when people lack focus to their project, that's when it's like, how seriously are you taking this? You know, like how strong are your creative convictions? And the more narrower your focus, the more infectious your conviction is. Oh, I think, hang on, I think I'm just, my daughter's coming in. Hey dude, I'm currently teaching class, but I'll be out soon. Okay, sweetie? Okay, well, you're gonna have to go find mom. I'm teaching, okay? I love you. All right. Oh my God, she's like all into capoeira, and she needs someone to set up her capoeira music so she can practice. That's fucking adorable. All right. Okay, cool. So, so keep marinating on those things and think about, like, you know, who's on your round table of style to begin with, and see if you could identify any kind of commonalities in that music, especially as regards some of these more abstract dimensions of aesthetics, such as mechanical versus imperfect, such as epic versus humble, such as the minimal versus complex, challenging versus archetypal, etc. Like, what are these dimensions? What are these dimensions? And those dimensions will emerge as you assemble that list of people, because there are certain ways of measuring. Like, do you measure punk rock bands by how much they fucking practice their instruments? Is that the most relevant dimension? Like, probably not, you know? Whereas other types of music, that could be the most important dimension, right? So the dimensions of style that you will be using to measure will emerge as you assemble that collection of deified pantheon artists or projects too, because there are some artists that like, I fuck with something that they did heavily, and then the rest of it leaves me cold, and that's normal. But figuring out like who's in the pantheon, what art is in the pantheon, why you connect with it, that's the first step. All right, now we have Nicholas the Patient. What is up, my dog? Thank you for.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. It's going great. These are always fun chats.
Absolutely.
All right. So, did you fall asleep, or did you catch the questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, yeah. So, what is the space? Who are the characters in the space? Explain your musical project in terms of that.
What really got me into it, and it's one of the people that I kind of want to emulate their styles, Peekaboo. I saw him at Spring Awakening a few years ago, and he was up on stage talking about how 3 years prior he was in the crowd, like he was standing in my shoes, and now look at him. So that just kind of got me thinking about starting to work on Ableton, and started listening more Peekaboo, more walk-on stuff like Slang Dogs, G-Rex, Sully, big RL Grime guy. So just kind of that style is something that I've always really enjoyed. Just kind of simplistic, G-Rex is just like dark, kind of white, black, just kind of heavier stuff, but still trappy. So just kind of that kind of sound. As far as characters go, I mean, I'm just trying to keep people moving. That's just the one thing that I always enjoy about going to shows, is just the constant moving back and forth. And I think that would just be the coolest thing, to be able to look out into a crowd and see everybody just kind of bopping to my music.
Okay, cool. So let's say that there's a festival. What stage is this music played on at what time?
Ideally, probably not the main stage, right?
Why not?
That might be a little intense, and I wouldn't want to throw people off if it's not what they're expecting, if I'm going for like a trappy, darker kind of vibe. But nighttime, maybe not main stage, but like second biggest stage, that would be the coolest, I think.
Okay, so nighttime, why not the main stage?
I don't know. I just feel like maybe I'm holding myself back a little bit, thinking that I wouldn't be able to get there.
Because there's some like Aphex Twin plays on the main stage. Flume plays on
Right.
the main stage. His music's like pretty chill. What's so not? A lot of his music's pretty chill. I've seen him headline the fuck out of a show. Bjork plays the main stage. I saw Death Grips play the main stage at a festival before. I know some weird ass music.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I guess, right?
Okay,
Why
so
not
then
the
what
main
kind
stage?
of who's curating this festival?
Oh, geez, I don't even know. I mean, Excision would be cool, just because like I've been to Base Canyon and Lost Lands and just had like the best time as far as organization goes and just like accessibility. So probably Excision, like Jeff would be cool, or Insomniac, I suppose.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, all right. So, we've got like, base stage seems to be like, some of the aesthetic dimensions that I found a little bit interesting was that you mentioned black and white. What
Yeah.
is it about that? Why did you mention that?
I love G Jones. Like he's been my guy ever since I started listening to electronic music. He's one of the first shows I ever saw, and just I thought his visuals with just the black and white, and it was pretty simple. I just thought that was really cool, and that just really resonated with me, and still does. I mean, even when I saw RL Grime, and his visuals was just red and then green, just colors on the screen. I just thought the simplistic approach was really cool.
Dope. Yeah, I'm noticing you have like a uniform framing on those pictures behind you. And they all seem to have some negative space in the design, you know, like it's clear you have an appreciation for design and for order. Do you feel that that is something that you'd like to put into your music?
I think so. I mean, I definitely tend to stick to the grid a little too much, where listening through some of my stuff, especially when I first started on Ableton, it sounds very just uniform, just, you know.
Yeah, a lot of
robotic,
those
but
artists that you make, their visual aesthetic might be black and white, but what makes the minimalism work about their music is the asymmetry of it.
yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely something that I could work on, is just like thinking a little more outside the box.
A lot of that stuff, micro timing is a very important dimension of those sorts of musical styles. And like, for example, like, if you listen carefully to like, you know, Flosstradamus, they make some of the most like, because it's so like OG for what you think of as electronic music, trap, you know, like, it's not like, you know, trap OG, like from the 90s and like to early 2000s, but in terms of electronic music, trap, like that was really when that whole thing blew up. They were kind of like the poster act. But if you actually listen to the timing of, for example, their hi-hats, like the grid, they don't have that like New Jack Swing shuffle that you get that makes turns like boop tick tock tick boop tick tock to boop kidiki dak kidiki kidiki dak kidiki, you know, it's like little clumps like gadink 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 gadink, the other kind of shuffle. You don't hear that, but you'll hear offset where like all of the hi-hats will be like 23 milliseconds late. All of the snares will be 2 milliseconds late. All of the kicks will be 15 milliseconds late, etc. Right? So think of micro timing not just in terms of groove and swing, because that's often where that conversation begins and ends with music producers. And they'll swing the whole grid, but they won't change the offset of the sounds relative to each other, right? And one of the things that makes really minimal music work, especially those acts like Peekaboo, for example, all of his drums are late. Like his melodies will be on the grid and all the drums are behind, right? So I would say analyze the micro timing of some of those artists, and especially as regards making individual tracks late, right? There's a device in Ableton, the Align delay, that I believe is, I forget if it's like my Ableton, I have Suite and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's like from some free Max pack, maybe the Creative Extensions pack. But the Align delay, once you have it, it's like shows up in your Ableton browser, like right next to the auto filter and everything. It just has the Max for Live Space Invader instead of the other Space Invader. But yeah, so that Align delay allows you to individually offset any chain or channel or sound or whatever, like the track delay does in the mixer, you know, like you can see where you can offset the tracks. Now the track delay, you can put in a negative amount of milliseconds and you can't put a negative amount of milliseconds on the Align delay, but the track delay causes all kinds of latency and mayhem that make it annoying to work, and the Align delay does not. And the track delay is available on like whole channels, but if you go into the individual chains of a drum rack, for example, which is where you would most like to put that effect, there are no individual track offsets for the chains inside of a drum rack. So you can use any delay in this way by just setting it all the way wet, no filtering, like no high pass, low pass, and then no feedback. And then you set it to like 1 millisecond. And then everything after that is 1 millisecond late, right? So you can use the normal delay like that, and you can use any normal delay in any DAW as an Align delay, but the Ableton Align delay is the best because it's really precise. You can use samples of offset instead of milliseconds of offset if you like. Also, if you're designing for like a physical space, you can, like, you know how when you have like a large format concert PA and there are perhaps multiple tiers of speakers as you go back into the audience, you need to be able to precisely offset those speaker stacks based on physical distance, right? Because sound travels like 1 millisecond per foot, basically, right? So like if you're like 2 feet away from your speakers, you're hearing everything 2 milliseconds later. Like it's not fast like light is, right? So, but yeah, so you can offset in milliseconds, in samples, and in distance. I've never used the physical distance one, but it is there. And then you can offset the left and right speaker individually, which can sometimes be useful. But a lot of what makes those artists and that music work, and a lot of what makes the minimalism in the music that those artists make work, is a line delay and offsetting the tracks versus each other. So it may not, like, getting off the grid doesn't necessarily just mean like going into Jay Dilla mode and turning the quantize off and playing in everything with your hands. It's also nudging the individual sounds relative to each other. Okay.
Gotcha.
So that will likely form a part of your style. And then, you know, when you think about those kind of artists and like what it is that like a Wakan or a Deep Dark and Dangerous or you know, like a RL Grime or Nightmare, like a lot of what it is that fans resonate with is like there's this like cool factor to that type of music, and a lot of the time people who resonate with that music, they're like, this shit sounds cool, I feel cool for listening to it, this is like a refined aesthetic, like this is a cut above. And a lot of that, it's like, you know, like if G Jones was like had like shitty graphic design on all of his stuff, and like he was just posting SoundCloud uploads with like a fucking potato phone picture of a fucking hamburger every time, and like, you know, being like, hey guys, sup, I don't know if it's any good, you know, like, would that music have that same effect? Like, fuck no, it would, you know? So think about your brand in terms of like art, visual art, and in terms of like what that visual art makes you feel, you know, fashion, like, because music is fashion, you know, like it or not, that is the function that music serves to a great degree when it comes to unifying tribes of people and providing like for the identity needs of any individual music consumer. Music is essentially serving like as a social filter the way fashion would. And it's also serving as an expressive purpose. You know, it's serving to filter the inputs and simplify the output of the individual. You know, style communicates louder than words, and it communicates instantly, you know, a lot about a person. All right. So think very specifically about like what, you know, what makes music feel cool to you, you know, and what things, you know, are there things that gave you that feeling before that no longer give you that feeling? And are there things that gave you that feeling a long time ago and you're surprised that they still give you that feeling? Right? And analyze carefully, you know, see if you can find, because like if you're going to make music that has a fashion purpose to it, right? You're going to want to think carefully about like what aspects of fashion will I always resonate with, that I'm like ride or die off into the sunset, and what aspects of this have been interesting as like a flavor of the week, but like I got tired of it sooner than I should have, you know, because whenever someone has created a style when you're making music that's like essentially, you know, fashion is an element, people usually will do some kind of version of this style manifesto process, whether it is intentional or unconscious, where they're like, hey, you know, I want to do something fresh, I want to do something different, I want to do something that stands out, and there will be a question that they've asked or a string that they've pulled at that has led them to that formulation of that style. And when you're reverse engineering it, you know, if the communication of that musician is effective, you should be able to reverse engineer the question that they were asking from the answer as presented. Right? So when you're thinking about these, you know, what are the timeless questions to ask and what are the questions of the moment, you know, because you're going to need to come up with your own question that people have not asked. It may not be like some grand question, like a lot of the time, simplest things. Like, I mean, one of the most fucking iconic, like, style moves is like, you know, the Neptunes, you know, being like, we're going to have tracks that are just drums. And like this woodblock sound that you would have like maybe had just like play the last upbeat every 4 bars. I'm going to play a melody on that shit and make it all fucking crazy with the pitch bent out. And that's my melody. And this whole track is just drums and this sound that you didn't think of is cool. Well, here it is making the craziest lead that you didn't come up with, you know? And that kind of shit is like really fresh. You know, they're questioning fundamental assumptions about not what can I add, but what can I take away, you know? And it's important to think about those questions in both of those ways. Or like, you know, Edit from the Glitch Mob, for example. It's like, I'm not going to ever use reverb. I'm not going to ever use hi-hats, you know? And like these restrictions can be very arbitrary seeming, perhaps to an outsider, but you know, figuring out like what the music that you like is not doing, you know, like figure out what are those questions and like, can you identify anything that was on their list to never do? Like, what would they it wouldn't even fucking dream of doing that in a million years. Like, what are those things? And there's this like, they call it like survivor bias, right? Where like, classic example, it's like it's World War II, the Allies are strapped. They're trying to bomb some Nazis. They only got so much resources to go around. And there's these bombers that are going out on runs and stuff all the time. And, you know, they're like, where do we put the armor? They can only carry so much armor. So they're like, okay, well, let's look at the planes that went out on the bombing runs. They're looking at the planes. They're like, okay, well, you know, it seems like they all got shot in the wings. And then, you know, some of them got shot in the tail and like some of them got shot here. And they're like, okay, so where do we put the armor? Do we put the armor on the wings? They're all getting shot in the wings. Do we put it on the tail? They're all getting shot in the tail. Can't fly without either of those things. Where do we do it? And then this mathematician homie comes in and he's like, you're going to armor the places that they were shot? You're idiots. They came home after being shot there. That meant that those are survivable hits. You want to find the places that no plane was shot because those are the kill shots. That's where you put the armor. Right? So that's survivor bias. You know, you want to like, you're looking for what maybe is not physically there in the music. You know, when you're examining these things, you need to find out what, you know, what are the unwritten rules? You know, what are the unconscious rules? And are there any specific rules that they're breaking? A lot of the time, a genre is united by a specific set of rules broken rather than followed, right? But you want to start thinking in terms of these, because like rules suck when other people are imposing them on you. But when you are imposing your own rules, that's the fucking best. That's so creative and expressive. And you get to like take intention and design in your life and music and art. And fuck yeah, definitely follow your own rules. But don't follow other people's rules, especially not unconsciously, you know? And these exercises are really how you get at that. Okay?
Yeah, right on.
Okay, and then everything that I said to everyone else still applies. You know, you're going to want to find textures and tones. You're going to want to find sparks, things that you look at that thing and you're like, I know just how the rest of the song goes, right? Things that are like creative prompts for human beings, things that will provide texture and tone, especially as regards percussion, because percussion is really the name of the game. That's where all the style is. A lot of it is like really, you know, how do you do drums? The thing everyone's done a million fucking times. You know, that's like the hero's journey of music. You know, it's like you all need beats. If you want people who are not professional dancers to dance and enjoy it, probably you're going to need something to keep time. You know, a professional dancer could dance to drone music or silence. You know, like that you're not worried about them. You're worried about the people who can't dance, giving them dance instructions. That's why the most popular dance music will always be, okay, white people, let's count to 1. You know, always. You don't need to do any math. You just repeat a motion. You're dancing, right? But yeah, so like it's the drums. The drums are where the dance instruction is. You know, you dance to the drums predominantly. So how do you give us something to dance to that feels fresh? Well, you get fresh ass drums. So start asking the question, what is a snare really? How necessary is a snare? How necessary are these other sounds? What are they really? Can I serve the function of this sound? You know, when you listen to like guys like Imanu or Camo and Crooked, the way they could create the vibe of a drum break without actually having a drum break in the music, amazing. You know, it's really amazing. It might be a gated chord sample that's functioning as a drum break, or perhaps just noise, you know, but how are they creating the vibe of a sound without it actually being there? Deconstructing sounds. And when you can deconstruct, you know, what a genre is and serve the function of the components of that genre without actually using the same components that everybody thinks they have to use because that's how it is in that genre, right? So how do you achieve, like, what are the functions of the pieces of that genre, and how do I deconstruct the functions of these individual components? That's really where you want to be when you're creating a style manifesto. Okay, cool. So then, you know, everything else that I said there, all the other ones still applies to, you know, think carefully about like your pantheon of artists, but it seems like you've done a lot of that work already and you're already thinking in fashion terms, which is excellent because that's how you have to think. So yeah, you're far along already. So good on you, Nicholas. All right. So we're going to go back here to Scott now. And, you know, I want to, you know, revisit this topic of style, focus, branding, etc., with you. And I want you to imagine that you are in the future. The musical dream you seek is in the past. You have already achieved this dream. And you have realized your creative vision fully. And there perhaps may be some career goals that you have left, but your creative vision it's done. It's not something you're trying to make. It's something you are making. And, you know, we're in a big city and there's, you know, a tall ass building and you got a meeting on one floor and your favorite artist, the number one on your list of your pantheon of artists that have inspired you, touched you, transformed you. Their music is your medicine at one point. The name at the top of that list walks into the elevator with you and hits a floor just above yours. You have maybe 30 seconds to answer them when they ask you, "Oh, you look like you make music." What do you say?
Damn, yeah, that's a good question. Man, I'm counting down the 30 seconds in my head right now because you said that. But honestly, if it was somebody I was really,
it's not if. It is a fact. It is a fact. We're talking about the music that you have made. Past tense. You have achieved your creative dream.
Yeah, man.
But like, into the elevator walks the number one person on the list that you just made.
Right on.
And they hit the floor just above yours. You have 30 seconds. And they look over and they say, "Oh, you look like you make music." What do you say?
Look what you did and look where I took it.
Oh, yeah? Where's that?
Damn, I I honestly don't know, man. I'll make something that feels organic, but yet still.
Can you visualize that?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah, I'm
visualize
getting there.
Can you visualize though the place that you've taken your music? Like, what is it? If the sky's the limit, you could dream into. You could be like, yo, I've got a fucking Neuralink connected to fucking robots with flamethrowers. Like,
Yeah, man,
whatever. It's all possible. It all is so possible that you have done it. What is that thing?
Yeah, like I don't know, meditative, mesmerizing bass, right? Organic sounds layered over the top of that, you know, and a good beat that still can get you moving, right, and bobbing your head.
Okay, so are you
brings you
playing
inside.
instruments? What is the face of this music? Like, what is what is it? What is in the front of the mix? Even if you're making instrumental music, there's always some sort of a sound or dynamic that is functioning as the singer in that band, and then the rest of the sounds are providing an accompaniment role. What types of lead elements are there?
Oh man, yeah, like old school samples, old organic instruments, like old guitar, old funk riffs. God, I don't know. There's so much, but yeah, primarily just like old samples or old instruments, analog layered over good layered bass. Like with good
Okay, well, okay. So then, what is it that what is it that makes that fresh? What's the freshness that makes this nostalgic rather than imitative?
Man, I honestly, I'm looking for that, you know. I really want to pull in, you know, like field recordings and odd things that you wouldn't think of sampling.
This is good. This is getting somewhere.
I mean, that's a lot of what I would like to be able to do. Right, we listen to all these conversations we're having, you know, and I'm really resonating with you talking about how important the drums or how the percussion fits in that, and that gives that vibe. So those samples pulling in interesting percussive elements that you might not think of, layered with, you know, oh man, I don't know, man. Like I've been really into like Afro-Cuban jazz lately.
So see, this is good. This is getting somewhere.
So, you know, I mean, I don't know where that's going right now, but
okay,
I like those complex chord progressions and that go with that.
I mean, you could say that you like a lot of physical sounds, and you know, physical sounds with, you know, with a DIY aesthetic, you know, but like saying like, hey, you know, like I really like putting texture forward. I'm really into organic sounds composed electronically, you know, would probably be a good way to put that.
Yeah, that's.
And then saying like, you know, I write insert emotion songs for insert style of human people, you know, so you can be like, oh, you know, I make sad music for Walmart greeters to cry to when they get home, you know, something like that. Like insert emotion for group of people. I make emotion for a group of people is usually a good start. And then being like, you know, who are these people? What are they for? Why is this their medicine? Right? That's the question you answer. Why is your music somebody's medicine? Whose medicine? How are they taking it? What does it give them? What's the payoff that it gives to that group of fans? That's the place to start answering that question. It's not about why you're impressive as a person.
Sure.
That doesn't matter. I'm sure you're like, I mean, honestly, the people that I meet through the dojo, most of them are like outside of music, like crazy fucking badasses. Like I'm sure you're genius in lots of ways, right? But when you're talking about your music Like when people ask me about my music, I'm not like, well, I'm a fucking genius. Let me tell you. Like that shit it sucks listening to that in a conversation. You don't say that to people, right? And if you do, there's usually something like you need more hugs when you're a kid or some shit, you know? So really when you're describing music and you're describing what makes music work, think about it like it's a fucking pill in a bottle, you know? Who takes it? Why do they take it? What does it do?
Nice.
Right? When you can describe music like that helps it come together a lot, right? So think about the dimensions of style that you have for these other artists in your like deified pantheon of inspiring musicians. And then think about like if they were in that situation, how would they describe their music as a drug? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
and
that's
like
good
think
hallmark
about it
right
as a
there.
place inhabited by people. Think about it as people inhabited by a drug, you know? Like think about it in these kind of like who is it for? What does it serve? When is it appropriate, etc. Any kind of way that you can ask yourself a visual question that makes you visualize that, the closer you'll get to getting at the nature of what it is that your style is, why people should care about your music.
Man, I love it. Yeah, that's got some work to do, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, this shit doesn't happen overnight, man. So don't. It's just important to start thinking about it. Start pushing that snowball down the hill.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, you are up. Okay, same question. Long elevator. The person. Oh, can you unmute yourself, please? But yeah, you're on a long elevator ride after having achieved past tense all of your wildest creative dreams, and the artist from the top of your pantheon list walks in, looks you up and down, presses the floor just above yours, and says, "So you look like you make music."
Yeah, I mean, I would say I make like positive, uplifting bass music that makes you feel like Superman, Superwoman, or whoever you identify with.
That's a great elevator pitch. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, tell me more. You know?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I don't know, a lot of music, like, I don't know, I like a lot of music that doesn't have like a message in the lyrics, you know, it's just kind of like party music, but I prefer stuff that has like a little bit more of an uplifting message. You know, words are magic, so something that, you know, is going to be a mantra that, you know, someone will repeat, and, you know, it will be something that will uplift them.
Cool. Well, that's a very clear idea of what you're trying to do. This is good. This will serve you well. Do you have a list of such phrases that you've been populating somewhere, perhaps in a notebook or a file on your computer or phone?
I mean, I definitely have like a lot of stuff in like journals. I mean, I read a lot of, you know, like stuff about presence and, you know, a lot of different books in that field. So I definitely have like lots of quotes written out.
Oh, great. That'll really help.
Yeah, I've definitely been like, I'm a collector of like a lot of things like that. So I'll just write stuff down, and then, you know, I feel like it will serve me at some point.
Cool. I think you should also so there's this like, just given the genres of music you've expressed interest in, you should check out there's like Steve Reich is someone who I think like everybody needs to know more about, but he has this method of using melodies that they're a method of composition that because he works with like tape loop samples and stuff and orchestras and would compose for human players in a mechanically inspired way. A lot of his techniques, like with phase rotation and stuff, are inspired by, like, you know, a literal physical flange. Like when you have two tape machines playing at the same time and you touch the flange on one of them, slightly knocking it out of sync, you get flanging effects. And he was like, what happens when you alter two rhythms at the same time. If you have two copies of a rhythm playing and one of them is slowly drifting against the other, and then causing these emergent complexities to come out in the music. So he's known for that. And then another one of his tape loop composition techniques, in addition to phasing, is speech melodies, where he would take a sample of someone speaking in like conversational language and then play it over and over again until you can find like the hidden melody of tones in their spoken language. And then he would annotate that. And when the tape loop sample comes in, there would be one or more players that would be like doubling that melody slowly. As the vocal repeats, the players would like pick the melody out of it. And then the vocal would kind of go away and the melody would often remain. Right. And this speech melody technique, as well as his phasing techniques, are something that you see throughout all of electronic music composition. But the speech melody technique you see especially in fucking party music. And it's like a kind of cool, intelligent compositional technique that is also very good for making people get stupid. And that is a fucking sweet spot compositionally for sure. So I think, exploring the composition or exploring the speech melody technique, Skrillex does it in that Yves Saint Laurent tune that he did. That tune was pretty good, where like all the melodies in the song are based on this one moment where the MC says, Yves Saint Laurent, and then it's like all of the notes in the song, like you realize after this one point in the composition, you're like, oh fuck, it was all like basically fugues of a speech melody from this one moment in the lyrics. It's awesome. It's such a great remix. But that speech melody technique is probably something to explore. And then, check out like Little Fluffy Clouds from The Orb, for example. It's like a long sample of music for 18 musicians by Steve Reich.
It's been a while since I've listened to that, but yeah, no, I remember that.
Well, listen to Music for 18 Musicians. You'll see, because the song is basically just a drum machine and a long sample from that, and then a sample of their friend talking about Little Fluffy Cloud. But yeah, so check out like those kind of phasing and doubling techniques, but specifically speech melodies and like phasing and doubling. I think if you basically like focus on encapsulating what it is that you're trying to say at a linguistic level, and then explore some of these compositional techniques that are based on like repetition and looping of spoken words and layering multiples of the same thing can really, there's a lot of meat on that bone kind of compositionally and style wise. And it's something that people have been really getting a lot of mileage out of for years. It's maybe not as immediately obvious to some, but yeah, so check that out. And then really getting to explore like Noisia, they would really explore that in the drum and bass world. The new SleepNet has a track that's like that, where he's basically using the speech melody technique. Nick from Noisia has this cool way of doing it, where he'll like take a sample that's like maybe a bar long, and he'll print it down as a wave table, and then you can load it into Serum. And then if you get good at wavetable extraction, it takes a little bit of doing, you'll probably make some shitty ones at first, but once you get the hang of that, it sounds a lot cooler than a vocoder, and it's got like its own kind of quirks that you can do. And he'll have like a ramp envelope that's like every bar repeating the quote unquote vocal that's actually just a wavetable made from the vocal in Serum. But then as the song progresses, that vocal, like he'll maybe change the timing of it by changing the depth of the wavetable modulation. Like, does it go slower? Does it go faster? You can adjust the micro timing of that loop. And then also, like, once you start hitting it with some frequency modulation or other things that you would be at home in a synth oscillator, but not at home in the human voice, you can make it sound pretty fucking cool and interesting. But he has this one where like the vocals like, I keep repeating the same patterns. And it just says that like over and over again. Or like the Noisia track Tentacles is like it's probably directly inspired by the Steve Reich speech melody technique as well. But yeah, so check out that speech melody technique and the phasing and doubling techniques, and look out for them in music around you. And then look out for those words and sounds that are, like linguistic concepts and stuff that excite you. But really just populating that folder of sparks is as much about the things that excite you enough to complete the rest of the creative process as it is also about what lights you up, So, but yeah, and then as you go down that, you'll get more and more out of your style. But I think having a really good, clear idea of that direction is going to really help you through this. And I'm excited to see where you take it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, word up. Okay, Jason, you are up, my man. All right, so same question. It's now, the hypothetical is now real. The future is now the past. You have achieved your wildest creative dreams, and you're riding in an elevator. In comes the person from the top of your list of your musical pantheon artists. If they're dead in real life, they're not dead now, or whatever. They press the button right above yours, look you up and down, and say, "So, you make music."
Thank you for contributing to my music. I mean, that's the least that I could say. There's a lot of things I could say.
Okay, so you say, wow, that obviously means a lot to you. You seemed very sincere about that. Tell me about your music. What's it like?
I have a hard time believing that I don't know.
I mean, it's not magic.
To believe this is real.
Dude, people get famous for making music that is objectively terrible all the time. You're fine. You can there's no reason to doubt that it's possible. Music is not a game of technical skill. It is a game of style largely, Can you create a style that other people find a Disneyland inside of,
Yeah. Thank you for helping me create medicine for myself and other people. In the way of style, I feel like I'm still, I don't know. I don't tend to just have, I don't just like drum and bass,
Well, style needn't be subgenre specific, And I mean, there are many artists who are defiers of genre, either they're totally outside of a genre or they're genre hoppers, like Matt Zoe, for example. He makes all different kinds of music, or Fortet makes a pretty wide range of music, but there's a common thread there, and I do find myself liking most of it, so style is not necessarily subgenre. Style could be, perhaps you have a certain melodic sensibility, or Nils Fromm, I think, is a really great example of style, because he's makes these compositions that are, pretty much all melody. And he has this record called All Melody, quite literally, where he's just he's got a piano, he's got a Rhodes on the stage with him, he's got a Jupiter, he's got a space echo, he's got a chorus echo, and then the most simple, there's almost never any drum beats at all. And it's literally just he'll play an arpeggio and loop it and then play the knobs on it. And then he'll start treating the piano like it's a percussion instrument, basically. And then just slowly making these waves and waves of treating piano as percussion, and he has no drums in his music. And then he percussively plays keyboard instruments. And that is it gives it so much of style and so much of, so much tension in the music. The tension is created by what he's not doing,
So
and
his approach and his techniques with his instruments.
Yeah, that makes, that his style is largely defined by using classic analog sound sources, such as the acoustic piano, a Rhodes, a Roland RE201 space echo, and the chorus echo, which I fucking hate him for having both of them. I would suck a dick for a space echo. I really would. They're so good. They sound so great. I'm a big fan. But yeah, and then like really simplistic drums, you know, nothing's very processed. And it's really that he approaches playing, you know, strictly melodic music with the same kind of repetitive minimalism and percussive playing that you would get from sequencing in a DAW, but he just basically like drums on the piano while looping an arpeggiator on the synth, and then he'll like put some delays on the piano for a bit so that'll carry off, and then he'll make new arpeggiator patterns and like ride them up and down with waves of delays and filter. But it's like he has a percussive approach to melody, and then that makes up for the fact that his music doesn't have drums in it. And that is it's such a specific style, and it fucking works, you know? So like it could be something like that. Like you don't have to be like, well, my music's like Sheryl Crow and Shania Twain got into a drunk fist fight doing coke in the bathroom at an IHOP. You know, that shit is like the worst way to explain your music style. Like if your musical style is two famous artists doing some kind of a questionable activity, and that's or putting them in a blender. Like who's putting artists in a fucking blender? Like stop saying that, people. Stop. But yeah, so it could be something like that. Like what is it that you're into enough to do? And like, is there, you know, like, can you create an asymmetry in the structure of how music is done? Like, what can you take away, and how do you fill that thing? Like Nils Fromm.
Something I like is snares in place of cymbals. Like I like when electronic artists don't have to use.
Oh, I fucking hate cymbals. I'm like, I hate them. I like never use cymbals.
I guess a lot of people like, and a lot of electronic music doesn't. It's not like in a rock band you have to hit a crash every 8 bars or toms.
Fuck a tom. I fucking hate toms. Fuck.
You hate toms? See, I love toms.
Yeah, it's different structure, different folks. No one's right or wrong. It's what makes
you utilize toms more in my music.
Yeah, frame drums are cool. You ever check out Ben Walsh?
No.
From Australia? He's really cool. He's like a frame drummer where he built this like it's like kind of like a octagonal PVC pipe structure filled with all of these different percussion elements. He's kind of famous for what he does. You may have had someone forward a video clip of him, but he stands in it, and it's like this octagonal structure that he plays it like taiko style with 2 drumsticks, and he's like constantly like just doing these like crazy fucking rhythms, like ricocheting around this frame thing, and it's like he fucking digs that shit enough that he's like, it's me in this fucking frame forever. Like I love this shit. And he's like a great producer too, but he's like, you know, for him, it's an instrument. For some people, it's a method of playing. For some people, it's, you know, an emotional palette. Like there may be like with, especially with kind of like punk sort of music, you know, you don't write a punk song about like fucking a nice day eating ice cream on the fucking beach and like how you're like, everything's great in the world. You know, if I could just freeze this moment. Like it's a rare topic for a punk song, you know. It's all like, these are the things that I don't like. Here is some swearing, you know. Like that's what you want. So it's like, you know. But yeah, so it could be an emotional palette. It could be any area of music. But what is it that you know? What is it that's calling to you?
And I feel like I've been trying to find that with my sound libraries and. With Logic and with Machine, I had a really hard time. It would take me an hour to try to make a kit in Machine. There was just something about the sound library, and maybe it was just the last 10 years of my life. I was just kind of like, I'm really discouraged, and maybe I should give up on music. Actually, like the last 4 years, I focused more on guitar than anything, and just recently I decided I felt something like. I miss this. I need this.
Yeah, and working on your strengths is honestly more important than developing your weaknesses. You know, and a lot of people will tell you, like, especially if you're teaching like a technical sort of course, that, you know, it's important to be well-rounded and like, yeah, you have to wear a lot of different hats when you're a producer, but like there's weaknesses that like are like, there's a certain amount where like if your mix feels inappropriate for the style of music that you've created, then that's an automatic disqualification. But beyond those like automatic disqualification, it's like, you know, they say money can't buy happiness. It's like, well, it can if your unhappiness is caused by lack of money. But once you've got enough money that to stave off immediately aversive like lifestyle effects, like once you have like, you know, a fucking house that you own and you're not worried where your food's coming from and stuff, then more money than that doesn't make you much happier. And like giving money away actually is the way to buy happiness. They found in studies where they gave people money and they're like, you spend the money on yourself, you're going to invest the money and you can take this $5, but you have to give it to someone else. And then you measure how happy the different people are in the different experimental conditions. And the experimental condition in which sharing was mandatory, those people usually report a greater level of happiness at the end of the study, right? So there are ways that money can buy. But anyway, the point is that there's like a disqualifying level for certain things, such as mixing and mastering, that, you know, yeah, if your music always sounds shit because you've never thought about what levels to put the sounds at, then yeah, you know, like that's going to be a disqualification. But once you've passed that disqualification level with the various skills, then it's far more about leveraging your strengths and building upon your strengths than it is about filling in any weakness. And, you know, like there are certain producers and musicians that like, you know, like I don't really give a fuck about how good DJ Assault is at EQing things. Like that's not why I like his music. Like he writes songs about body parts and there's lots of swearing in them and classic Roland drum machines. And that's why I like his music. It's a drum machine and swearing. And that's what makes it good, you know? So it could be, you know, there could be ways to make your weaknesses irrelevant. You know, like, does it matter that the Sex Pistols don't practice? You know, it doesn't really. It didn't. It was not important to what they were doing, you know? So there may be ways that, you know, being a well-rounded musician and making good music and stuff is not irrelevant. It's far more important to be like, what is the direction that I can take far enough that I know that it's too far now, you know, because only one who has gone too far can know where the limit lies. And the game of style is a game of expanding what is musically useful, you know? It's like the history of music is something that is unacceptable, that nobody does, that you're a fucking idiot if you do that thing. Someone figures out a way to rock it. And everyone else is like, fuck. We didn't even touch that. It was right there the whole time. And they were the one who fucking went out on a limb and did it. Oh, I got to go hop on that bandwagon. And then it starts becoming trendy. And then once it's been trendy for a while, yeah, it becomes normal. And then after a while after that, then it starts to become boring. And then it becomes passé. And then like, you know, like, cause I mean, like jazz music, you listen to it in an elevator. There were times you'd get kicked out of your parents' house. They'd fucking disown you for listening to that. They're not following the sheet music. They're just making it up. That just ain't music. That rap music's just a bunch of talking, you know, et cetera, right? So figure out what is a direction that you want to run until you're like, okay, this is too far now. You know, what's something that's interesting enough to you that you can take it too far? And then when you reach that point of failure, you know precisely how much to dial it back so that you're at the outer limits of the fringe of whatever that dimension is. And then you can come back and show us that we need to enlarge our musical possibility. You know, that is much more important than like fucking running down some fucking checklist of skills you're supposed to develop. Right. So think about that. You know, it might be that you want to make. Like, cause I mean, like, I don't know if you like metal, but like Periphery, they have like fucking 7 guitarists in that band. It's
Yeah.
insane. Like, do you need 7 fucking guitars? But
No.
if you're Periphery, you do. Like, then they
do,
make
right.
great music with 7 guitars. It's excessive, but that's why we love it, you know? So what is an excess that you can revel in? What is something that you can push so far that it's too far, and then dial it back just enough that you're like, okay, here I am at my little fucking peninsula.
That makes me realize my lead sounds. I've come up like all these ambient. I don't know. I've just had all these ambient sessions and trying to design synths and ES2 for quite some time before I got into guitar for a few years. And I guess guitar gave me some music theory knowledge of pentatonic and blues scales, which great. Okay, that's kind of helpful in some
That's
ways,
super
but-
helpful, dude. Playing any
Um,
instrument is incredibly helpful for any music making. Like, that is time well spent.
I think I've overlooked some of that, and it's like I have to allow myself to be myself in music. I feel like I just like I don't know, maybe tried to be someone else too much and use off the shelf sounds too much. And really, if I spend some time with drums,
Yeah, and
making
I mean,
my
the
drum
imperfections
racks-
are what makes it human. You know, the imperfections are what makes it interesting. Like, I can go to Suno.ai and be like, give me that down the middle boilerplate fucking archetype of genre X, and it'll do a great job of it, and it'll spit it out in a minute. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I got a song now. And it's like, is that fucking interesting? Is that creatively fulfilling? Not really. You know, I type some words into a fucking prompt, you know, and it can do it right down the middle. It'll get you exactly the fucking middle of that genre. But it's where the action is at the fringes, you know, and the humanity is at the fringes. And like, you know, a lot of the time it takes imperfections to make something feel perfect,
Yeah.
you know? So just,
Right.
you know, just be aware that like the true essence of the music is human, you know? It's like, and a lot of the best music is when people are like, okay, I'm not gonna like make a fucking rap song about why I'm the greatest and every other rapper sucks. I'm gonna rap
Yeah.
about like why I sometimes think I'm going insane, you know, or why I feel like I'm broken inside. Like, those songs are often much more interesting, you know? So, so yeah, keep that in mind, you know, and sometimes, you know, embracing your flaws and putting them on display is what it takes to cut through the noise of all this like packaged fucking mask wearing facade that we get bombarded with all day on Instagram, you know? The humanity and truth have a way of cutting through the noise that is difficult for those trying to compete, who are competing to be the most normal in category X. They can't step to that, you know? So
Yeah.
so just figure out what are the strings that you're gonna pull all the way to the edge.
Right on.
Okay?
Cool.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Word up. Okay, so Nicholas the Patient. We are back. What's going on? Oh wow, what a dramatic entrance lighting there. It was like you're like all like silhouetted. You're like, and that's when the alien autopsy happened. Like that was you for a moment. Yeah, so same question. You have achieved your wildest musical dreams at a creative level. Everything you've ever wanted to do, you have done in the past. You confidently walk into an elevator where you're going to go see one of your most favorite people in the world. And then in walks the person who's at the top of your artist pantheon. They press the button for the floor above yours, check out your very specific sense in fashion, correctly assume you must be a musician, ask you about your music and what makes it cool. What do you say?
I would say that I make music that people can dance to and music that they can also listen to in solitude and enjoy. the same
That could
amount.
be any music made by any person ever.
Fair enough.
So can you be more specific?
I make music that would be enjoyable in a dark dark live setting, like in a club, but also just driving in your car on your way to work in the morning, which I know that could go with anything either, but I guess with the genre or like the kind of style I'm going for.
I mean, dark venue definitely says a lot. You know, a lot of the most sonically fashionable music is often listened to with a very pointed lack of visual production. You know, like the Deep Medi crew, for example, are pretty famous for doing that. There was a venue in Vancouver where like the Lighter Crew guys, they would do these warehouse parties, and their production, quote unquote, was like the best sound system in town. And then they would have one red light bulb above the DJ, and that was it. And people would do all kinds of weird shit in the dark, and you'd listen to really weird music in the dark with a bunch of weirdos. So, you know, that's, you know, you could say I make weird music to listen to in the dark room on a really nice sound system with a bunch of other weirdos. That's like, I'm like, oh, what's that about? You know? But yeah, getting really clear about, like, you know, what, like, you can say, you know, having other artists or genre names in your explanation of your explanation of it is fine, as long as you're not like, it's like artist X and artist Y had a baby and blah, named it blah, like that. As long as it's not like that shit, then you're fine. But just be like, you know, what is this music? What is this music for? You know, like, I make dumb music for smart people, you know, would be a interesting one, you know, or like what, you know, stark and bold are adjectives I would often use to describe that kind of like heavy experimental festival trap West Coast, like, you know,
So like spooky, kind of spooky.
yeah,
almost.
spooky would be good, but yeah, get adjectives. Like, I make adjective music for group of people to feel adjective to. Right? Like, that's kind of like a pretty standard formula, but like, what is the drug? Why do you take it? When do you take it? You know, what specific ailment does your drug cure?
Oh, you're asking me? Sorry.
Yeah. If your music was a drug, who would take it and why, and what would they experience upon taking it? Oh my God, yes, slow form in the YouTube chat. I was just reworking my bio last week, and I'm going to start describing my music as garden grime. Love it. Bingo. Awesome. And you should check out her music, because it is garden grime, if ever I've heard it. That's awesome. You're right, Katie.
I would say that it would be for people who just want to have something. I know I said it before, I'm repeating myself, but who just want to like bob their head, you know, and just kind of enjoy like a solid beat with like good drums, and just not have to think too far into it.
But that could be like Mickey Hart fans. That could be Rush fans. That could be, you know, like, I mean, could say, you know, abstract electronic music that challenges musical conventions and, you know, explores surreal, drugged out sonic realms, you know? But yeah, think carefully about it. Like you want to be able to, you know, you make your Dungeons and Dragons character sheets for your musical pantheon, and then you think, like, what do they say? And like, when you have achieved your goal with style, a person who has never received your elevator pitch should be able to accurately and spontaneously compose it for themselves when explaining your music to one of their friends, because that elevator pitch is going to have to be like, that's how they explain your music. And you got to make it easy for them, because you need your idea to spread. And if other people can't say this, like, I mean, my buddy Antennae had this great genre where he's like, I make acid crunk. And that was like not a genre, but it was when he said it. And like, you can imagine very clearly, like, acid crunk, I'm thinking like, okay, this shit is for sure from California. Like, I know what that shit sounds like in a second, even though that's not a genre, it is, you know? So like thinking like what, you know, if you can boil it down to like, you know, a couple words, such as Katie did with Garden Grime. It's very succinct, Katie. But yeah, that kind of you know, you want to be specific. Like acid crunk is real specific. You know just what it sounds like when you hear those two words together. Garden grime, you know exactly what that shit sounds like. I don't even have to explain it. Yeah, like, yeah, you know, yeah, spooky trap music is definitely a good one. I mean, there is already a spooky trap ladder with some fairly unassailable names at the top, but that is good. That is clearly expressed what it is in terms of style. Like, I know what to expect if you say those words, you know. So, but because like most music comes to you through the conversation conduit, right? You have a conversation with one of your friends, and you're like, "What's this interesting music?" And they'll say, "Oh, that's insert interesting description elevator pitch. It's made by insert hopefully memorable artist name." If they can't spontaneously compose that elevator pitch just from listening to your music, and if that elevator pitch is not appealing to me, and your artist name is like ungoogleable, like I have a friend whose artist name is 0 = 0. And it's literally like, it looks like a little barbell, and you cannot type it into a search engine. Like, it just does not work because of the way search engines work. I'm like, oh, Jason, you fucked yourself with this artist name. Like, there's no way that, and he was like, no, my music's for hipsters. It's just like, oh my God, dude, you know, like, come on. So, you know, but yeah, so you want to make it as easy as possible for people to tell their friends. You want to make it easy to remember. It's got to be appealing in some way, because a name like Defect could be appealing to certain people. You know, it doesn't have to be like Smiles and Sunshine. Like the Butthole Surfers is the perfect fucking artist name for that band. It's like, it's not, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess it would be, I don't know. It doesn't sound that fun, but I'm like, okay, a band that calls themselves that, they're probably going to be pretty cool, you know? Yeah. So it doesn't have to only be limited to like, you know, flower rainbow ponies, you know, like you can have some grit in the words, but it's gotta speak to people. No, it's gotta speak to people. But yeah, so think about what I've said. Think about the artists on your list. Perhaps practice making elevator pitches for, like, who's on the top of your list?
I would say out of the list that I gave, probably G-Rex would be the one that I listen to the most.
G-Rex in 5 words or less. What's the style about?
Dark, heavy, spooky, trap.
I mean, I know what to expect from that description.
Simple wouldn't be the right word, because it's not necessarily
minimalist is the fancy way to say simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, think about that. And then if you really want to sexy it up, bring a cultural dimension, a social dimension, talk about who the audience is. Because when I'm reading an artist bio and that bio is talking about me, I'm like, this is my shit. Right? Because, like, you know, it's like listing the features of things as opposed to the benefits. You know, like listing the benefits of your music is a more powerful pitch than the features. The features may be more technically accurate, but the benefits make a better pitch. All right. Okay. All right. I think that's probably good for today. We went probably over by a bunch. Oh my God, we went over a lot. But that was fun. And yeah, any of you have any questions? All right, cool. Well, I'm really stoked to see you in the Producer's Path and to get at it. We start next week. I'm really excited. I was just making some visuals for the mixtape that we're doing for Remix Your Life. We'll probably do a Producer's Path mixtape at the end too. We have a new anonymized system now so that the track names all get scrambled and the curator just gets like a pile of files with random letters. So then nobody like can take it personally if they don't make it on, or if one person makes it on more than once or whatever. So you can submit as many tracks as you want, and then they all go into the anonymizer. And then someone who's from outside the dojo who has no idea who's who or what, they put together the mixtape, and no one ever knows who they are. It's a way better system. So I think this is going to kind of result, like, because before there would be some people who would get really sad when they didn't make the mixtapes, and I was like, oh, I've worked so hard to make someone sad. This sucks. So I'm hoping this new system works. I have a feeling it will. And yeah, and then we'll rock it out. Oh, Adventures of Fuji Bear asks, how much experience with DAWs and instruments is preferable to join Producer's Path? It is good for beginners. This is the one thing that I do that is recommended for people who have never made music before, as well as people who are seasoned. Because as you can see from today's session, these are questions that are good to ask at any skill level, and they're fundamental to starting out. And if you start out with a good picture of the answer to these questions, the whole thing becomes easier, right? So, and yeah, but it's not presumed that you have any experience at all for the Producer's Path. And if you don't like it, you can get your money back. It's a love it or a refund guarantee, because people love it. I'm not confident that you'll love it. All right, cool. I think that's it for today. It was great to hang. I can't wait to see you in the Producer's Path, and we will rock it and make all kinds of music. All right, peace out. Easy.
Thank you.
Did you know that you could be proud of the music you're making 90 days from now, even if you've never made music before? All it takes is a commitment to 5 minutes a day. Yep, just 5 minutes, and you'll embark on a transformative journey into music production and self-discovery. Can you spare that? I'm Bill Gates, and I've spent 20 years distilling my experiences with Grammy-winning artists, making tracks played over 65 million times into something epic for you, the Producer's Path. This isn't just a course, it's a gateway to mastering music production without needing expensive gear or prior experience. You don't need to be born rich, you don't need to be born gifted. All you need is a commitment to spending 5 minutes a day on music. The Producer's Path is a proven system that has supported top artists throughout the industry. And now it's your turn to access these secrets and forge your own unique sound. As you journey through the 12 levels of the Producer's Path, each step designed to build your skills and confidence, you'll not only learn music production, but also discover how to express your individual style, breaking the rules like a true artist. Join our vibrant Producer Dojo community, get feedback on your tracks, and maybe even feature on a Dojo mixtape. With no subscriptions and free updates for life, your path to music mastery is evergreen, and you can come back again and again and again, getting more out of it each time. So what's it going to be? Continue as is, or spend the next 90 days at the dojo transforming into the music producer you've always wanted to be? Listen to what your fellow dojo members have achieved with the Producer's Path. Their success stories could be yours.
I started from zero.
Dude, the way you laid it out,
Here's what you do first.
It's amazing.
The habit tracking changed my whole mindset.
honestly,
Huge breakthrough.
Huge difference.
comprehensive.
Game changers.
It gives me goosebumps.
Just blows my mind.
That's when I was like, okay, I can make music.
I'm actually doing some art
Making music felt more real at that point.
to understand, hey, I'm doing this shit right.
I can show my children's children who I was.
Other people have been saying it sounds good.
Everybody's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting.
Never found the answer until I went to the Producer's Path.
Boop, boop, boop.